Structured the way it is, it could only be used for sure.
Yeah, the stormwater use only.
Why?
And that is, oh no. Periodically, they revisit it based on the current needs and adjustments.
Is that kind of or is that supposed to be a practice in the sense of, is that something that council has?
Okay. Is it not? So definitely. Okay. Okay. All right. Sorry. Okay. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would you all please stand and join in a moment of silence?
Present, I will now call the roll. Village Attorney Serafin.
Present.
Village Manager Benton.
Here.
Councilwoman Birch.
Present.
Councilman Meltz.
Here.
Councilman Zelkowitz.
Present.
Vice Mayor Brady.
Present.
Mayor Glenn will be with us shortly. Vice Mayor, you have quorum.
All right. Well, I think our first thing on the agenda tonight, we're continuing the tradition of the House of the Month. Is the Puar family here present tonight? Okay, no. Okay, we didn't think so. So, but we'll if you can see up here, on the screen, that one of the many people here in Miami Shores that have been doing a lot of improvements to their home, and they, for that reason, they were recognized by the village, and we will have a certificate to present to them next time that we do see them. So the second item that we have in the presentation tonight, we have a presentation about recently the village had decided to go ahead and engage in the age-friendly initiative. And so we have some people here from the AARP tonight to talk a little bit about the age-friendly initiative and some other information about our community. So if you'd please come up and just state your name for the record.
We're not doing it together. Good evening. My name is Victoria Funes. I'm an associate director with AARP Florida. I'm based out of Doral, but I work the whole state. And I'm here today to present to you the age-friendly certificate that you joined the age-friendly network back in December. And this is the village commitment that going forward, you're going to be thinking about how aging affects all the people in your village, and you're going to go forward with making plans and having that be the underlying consideration that you do have an inclusive, age-friendly city going forward. You are in the process of doing surveys of your Miami Shores residents. I went to Barry University, by the way, which I just learned is in Miami Shores, so I did not know that until today. So once this survey is complete, that will gain some information as to what your residents are saying that they would like to see or what improvements they would like to see in the village. And that is the information that you will take then into consideration to formulate your 5-year plan. You have a couple of years in which to formulate that 5-year plan that then gets submitted by ARP. It gets reviewed, and usually there's a couple of questions on the plan, but the approval rate is very, very high. And then once you get your plan approved, then you basically start working on that. One thing that I do want to mention is anything that you are doing right now, that it's already inclusive of all ages in your village, should be part of that plan. It's not assumed that you're going to start from scratch. So any programs that are already in place would be part of that plan. And then at the end of 5 years, we ask you to come up and give us a review or let us know how it went, and then you get to reapply to be an age-friendly community again. In Florida, we have 23 age-friendly communities or municipalities, and Miami-Dade County is the only county that the entire county has been approved as an age-friendly county. Do you have any questions for me?
All right, no, thank you. And I think we had and also accompanying presentation to, to outline a little bit about, so if you please, you step up and introduce yourself and.
Okay. And this is your certificate. I'll just.
Oh,
here.
wonderful.
Here, why don't we go ahead
Here,
and see if we
yeah.
can get
Okay.
Yeah, you want to accept the certificate for?
Sure, come on up. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
want
I
us to-
appreciate you coming out here.
You want me to stand
Yeah,
there?
yeah, please come on.
Let me
Perfect.
if I can figure out how to get my phone to work today.
Oh, we can look this way. Yeah, the high one.
Okay.
See if I can get the council one. Councilman's office.
Photo ops.
The last one.
Thank you. What I wanted to do briefly was really to thank the commission that voted, the council that voted to join the Age Friendly Initiative, and to thank you for taking on a very important issue in terms of moving forward. What I had provided to each of you was kind of a summary of some data about Miami Shores. And let me see if I can do this. Population, as you can see, we have a large number of people under 14 and a large number of people, roughly a third of Miami Shores is 50 or over. Even though the 65 and older is not particularly old, the 65 and older is not particularly old. You do have a large number, we have a large number of people who are between 50 and 64 and who are going to be moving into being older adults. Just another diagram that kind of shows what that looks like. For gender, one of the things we know when we look at gender is the older the population gets, the more female it gets. So when we look at gender for the total population, it's slightly more female. But when we get down to people that are over 65, it goes from being about 51 female to being 57% female. And we'll come back to that because that's an issue that we need to think about. It just shows the gender. And as you can see here, more females, even more females than over 85, quite a few more females than males. Race, ethnicity, when we look at people over the age of 65, this is the ethnicity for the entire community, 42% white non-Hispanic, 24% Hispanic, 1.4% black Hispanic, Afro-American 23rd, and then other And there's some weird things in the census data which tells me a bunch of foreign nuns may have moved to Berry College at one point in time. Anyway, just another way of looking at that. When we look again at race ethnicity by age, what occurs is the population becomes more white, non-Hispanic, less black and less Hispanic. Again, very typical of what the U.S. population looks like. And as we can see here, again, the older the population gets, except for the little 75 to 85, the more white non-Spanish it gets. Households, 33% of the households have people under the age of 18 in it, but 26% of people, households in Miami Shores, have someone over the age of 65. This is something that we're going to talk about, and my wife was reminding me that years ago she had worked with Mr. Benton in terms of figuring out some ways to help older adults who were living alone after some of the hurricanes, and did some work with Miami Shores Elementary and with the Boy Scouts. So what we see, there are 900 households that are single people, roughly 25% of the households. For males, 20% of those, a little less than half are males, but 20% of householders living alone are over the age of 65, and 42% of females over the age of 65 are living alone.
How is that possible?
How's what's possible?
Between 56 and 65 years of age, you've got more registered voters in the population?
No, you have 8,000 registered voters in Miami Shores. I have 8,000 registered voters. Here you have a little over 3,000.
I thought the blue was population in that.
The blue is the blue is the number of people. The orange is the registered voters.
So you have more registered voters than people.
No, the orange is all smaller except when you get over the age of 65, which is.
Oh, I think it's all right. It's not that important.
We are in some regards very fortunate. On the whole, the population of Miami Shores is reasonably well off, though we do have a small number of people that are below the poverty level. Residents over the 65, 10% are below the poverty level, with an additional 8.5% who are below 200 times the poverty level. For those of you who are not aware, poverty level in the U.S. today is about 12,000 for a single person. And we consider this. And that's kind of the overview. Wanted to get some baseline information. We're now talking about trying to do two sets of things. One is to go through and meet with all of the city's various and sundry advisory committees and talk to them about what they think about age-friendly and what kind of things they think we should do. And then to look at some methods for surveying the community to try to get some response from people about what they see as being issues that they need or would like to see addressed. But thank you very much, and again, thank you for having gone through and authorized this. I think this is going to be a very interesting journey and one which should make Miami Shores a better place for all of us.
Thank you. Yeah, did the blue hearts right here? Okay, great. Any further questions, council, on the initiative? Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, here's a take the reins. All right. So I think we're going to go backwards now, one step, and present. Oh boy, the House of the Month award to the Pluhar family, to Jessica and Richard. And are you the?
Yes.
Oh, okay, come on up.
Unfortunately, he's on a different schedule than the rest
Oh
of us. So.
boy, it's okay.
Yes.
Wow. Unbelievable. How old are you?
He is 5 weeks.
Yes.
Wow, amazing.
This is Jacob.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's an early start in politics.
Yeah.
Well, well, first of all, congratulations on the House of the Month for the, do we have pictures of this one to put up? Yeah, yeah, okay, maybe we'll put it
Before
back,
and after.
maybe somehow. But I want to obviously show the audience, what the Pluhars accomplished on their house. We're very excited about it. They moved into Miami Shores Village on Valentine's Day in 2018 from New Jersey. And they picked a project that was in real need of some love, and they wanted something that they could mold into their own. And the property was completely renovated and brought up to code. And the facade of the property was totally removed, giving the property a more open appeal, which they complemented with the color scheme. The village is always happy to welcome new families, and even happier when the family is also a welcoming family. As you can see, they are the proud parents of a beautiful baby boy, and we love families here in the village, and we're thrilled at what they did with their house, and we hope that they enjoy the community here for many years. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, I don't know if you guys want to say anything.
We're new to Florida, new to Miami Shores, and so far it's been a really amazing experience. We have family that lives in Miami Shores, which is what attracted us to the village, and it's been a really positive experience and a wonderful 1 year.
Yeah.
We're happy to be part of this community.
And helping expand on it as well. So.
Yeah.
If you guys will come around, we're going to take another
Sure.
picture. So there you go, guys. Sorry. Congratulations and thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay, great. So we're going to move along now, I think, to public comment. And everybody is welcome to come up and speak. If there's a specific agenda item that you'd like to speak on, a lot of these will have a public hearing associated with them, specifically if you're coming to speak about the stormwater management program. There will be a specific item and an opportunity to speak on that, although there's nothing to foreclose you from speaking up front as well. You're more than welcome to do so. But we ask that you just come up to the microphone and give your name, your address, and you're free to speak for 3 minutes on whatever's on your mind. We'd love to hear it.
Good evening, Lou Perez, 145 Northeast 103rd Street. I'm here once again to advocate for the speeding enforcement in the village. As stated, I live on 103rd Street, just happened today. I'm outside doing some work and happened to hear two vehicles speed by heading eastbound on 103rd. It kind of caught my eye where there these two dark colored vehicles. They just blew by. I said, now here we go again, another speeding issue going by. A little while later, going to go to Home Depot, drive by Country Day, and I believe this is one of the vehicles. Obviously I cannot prove it with all certainty, but I believe this is one of the vehicles that blew by. This is over there by Country Day on 107th. This vehicle wiped out a bus bench, which is right there. Could have been a person sitting there, could have been a student, could have been a bit later in the afternoon. I took this around 12:30 in the afternoon. Just think about the consequences of schools letting out these people doing this kind of stuff. We have a serious problem with the speeding. I know that we tried to put out the signs that really people don't care about that. We've got, right now, a police vehicle parked in one of the corners on 103rd there. That doesn't stop them. What stops people from speeding is issuing citations, having police officers out there with a speed gun, nailing these people that are, after a while, it begins to sink in. And it's just not a matter of, we're gonna do it today and maybe 3 weeks from now. We need to consider doing something on a regular basis. So, again, please, this should kind of add to the fuel to this fire. That could have been a person sitting there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, come on up.
Name is Joe Schweiger. I live at 1196 Northeast 97th Street. I wanted to piggyback a little bit on the comments we just heard, although my specific concern really isn't so much about speeding. I do have a concern with that, but I'm not perhaps as exposed since I don't live nearby a school where my children are perhaps as much at risk if they're playing outside. But I do have a concern about the traffic light that is at 96th Street and Biscayne Boulevard. I cannot tell you how many times I've almost been wiped out at that intersection that I don't even use it unless I absolutely have to. For me, I'll take the 10th Avenue road in order to gain access to the boulevard by going down 10th Avenue and finding another street. I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting there because the left turn signal, and that is a major thoroughfare, gets so backed up that people run that light on the green, coming not even from just the left turn lane, but also from the center lane, which is supposed to be going straight. And, you know, we need more enforcement, I think even specifically at that location, to try to put an end or minimize the potential danger that's inherent at that intersection. As a secondary comment, I don't understand why at that light, even though there's a left turn lane to go south, there's no arrow for the people to go left turn south. So you can sit there being stuck for 2 changes of the light sometimes, or you're forced to do the same thing that the people on the other side are doing to make their turn, run it on a red and try to squeeze your way through just so you can make a turn because you're not afforded the opportunity because of the way that traffic flow pattern is in existence. If there's a left turn arrow to go north, I don't see why there can't be a left turn arrow to go south and sort of equalize that. It's just picking up on the traffic comments, you know, a dangerous intersection that is, you know, thought for improvement if the council has any ability to do anything in there and have an impact. And I see the attorney shaking his head going, no, but I can't imagine why you can't contact DOT or transportation and something else in order to, you know, have them perhaps look at it and address that issue. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to pile on that light. Please do. Because I go through there, Glen Ivy, 1268, Northeast 93rd. That light is also very irregular. You come from the east going west. Sometimes only 2 cars can get through that light, sometimes 10 cars. So you never know, you know, it backs up there and you might be one of those 2 cars that gets through, nothing else. It's very irregular. That's my only point.
Thank you. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Lucy McGuire, and I'm a resident at 565 Northeast 101st Street. Before I get started, I'd like to thank a couple of people here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking your time. I'd also like to thank personally Mr. Meltz, Ms. Birch, Mr. Brady, and Mr. Benton. Thank you so much for taking my concern, our concern, the residents' concern, seriously. We have a big problem. We have a pedestrian crosswalk on 101st Street and Northeast 6th Avenue that was just recently installed. However, what we didn't expect was that it was going to give this incessant sound 24 hours, 7 days a week of beeping sound. I'd just like to put a little clip so that you can hear how I spend my Sunday evenings. This is going on all the time. You can imagine what I have to endure. And if you don't mind, I'll just leave here this. resident. Mind you, I have to listen to this 24 hours, 7 days a week. So I'm sure you can deal with it for just a few minutes. Anyway, my concern is that I hope that the council, as well as the village manager, would please acknowledge the situation. It is a noise disturbance, and it is in complete violation with the noise tolerance level that is in the ordinance. And it really is a complete disturbance. It is intolerable for the residents near that structure. You cannot imagine being out in the garden outdoors and listening to this incessant beeping sound. That's all I really have to say, and I'm just wanted to put a name with a face. And thank you again. I did email all of you. I'm so sorry, Mr. Zelkowitz. I will make sure I'll send that email to you. I apologize, that was my fault. But you got pretty much the idea of what I was talking about.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Chris McGuire, 565 Northeast 101st Street. I have the privilege of being married to Lucy over here. So not only do I have to listen to the beeping, I have to listen to her talking about the beeping, which she's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. We were pleased. We live 2 houses in from 6th Avenue on west of Northeast 6th, and we were very pleased to see that the crosswalk was going in because, as Lou pointed out, people like to speed. Back years ago, I grew up not far from here. You knew not to speed in Miami Shores. People don't know that anymore. And even with the new crosswalk, I can tell you it's one of the newly designed ones where you hit the button and it's designed to blast a yellow flashing light to get traffic to stop. Traffic doesn't always stop. So we get the fact that the beeping is there for ADA reasons for somebody who's sight impaired. However, and I don't mean to make light of the situation, you would have to be a totally irrational person to be sight impaired and try to cross 6th Avenue not being able to see the oncoming traffic with the crosswalk. Because people aren't stopping, it's new, so we need some time for the community to get adjusted to it. As I said, we're very happy the crosswalk's there because it's on the bike path, and I can't tell you when I'm out working in the garden, taking care of the lawn, how many times I see people pushing strollers with their children who are risking their lives trying to cross that very busy street. You can wait a while, and I've seen people almost be hit. So the crosswalk is necessary. What's not necessary is the 24/7 beeping. And it is loud. The decibels, we haven't measured the decibel level, although you got an idea of it. It's equivalent to being hooked up to some kind of machine in an ICU room, non-stop. So all we're asking is for your support to address it with the FDOT and align it with every other crosswalk on 6th Ave that doesn't have that beeping. It's mind-boggling.
And again, I'd like to thank Mr. Benton and Mr.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No.
Again, I'd just like to thank
Yeah.
you very much for your
One
support.
at a time, yep.
So yes, we're very grateful for your responsiveness and willingness to address the issue. And at the end of the day, it's nice to have that crosswalk. We just need to tweak it a little bit, and we'll be okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you
you.
both.
You're right.
Come on up.
We did have one concern that we did want to also
Could you
bring
just-
up. Again, it's Richard
Yeah,
Pluar. We're
for the
at 5 Northeast 105th Street. And we're right there on North Miami Avenue where it goes from the 4 lanes to the 2 lanes. That's also where the speed limit drops down from 40 to 30 miles an hour. We seem to have an issue with not only the speeding, but a lot of people try to race each other and try to cut each other off to try to get to that merge. We did have somebody that missed that, ended up in our driveway, damaged part of the lawn. It happens on a regular basis where they drive over the swale. We want to see if it's possible to put something there to possibly protect our home, obviously with the new child and stuff. The last thing we want is somebody missing that intersection and driving into, our driveway or into the house itself. So I have spoken with the police department. They said there's really not a whole lot that they can do. They did say one idea would possibly be bringing it up to you guys and maybe the DOT about looking at changing that traffic pattern. They mentioned something like what you guys did at the Starbucks here to help put the they're not cones, but those pipes that force people to not cross over. So that was one idea, was maybe those people that are turning to get onto 105th, then that way they can't, cut over at that last minute and cause, incidents right there. But we do see it on a much, very consistent basis. It is a concern, and obviously the speeding is also a big deal, because that 40 to 30 people just do not care about it. And especially late at night, I'm seeing a lot of just high-speed activity and stuff going through there, so that's it. Thank
Great,
you.
Thank you.
Can I stay here?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep, please.
Okay. My concern is about the traffic, the speeding.
Can you give us your name and address?
My
You don't
name
have to stand
is
up. It's okay.
Maria,
Yep.
And I am living in 63 Northwest, 1 of Media Street. And my concern is about the speeding, the car, because it's crazy. 2 years after I came here, one guy, because it's that they, I don't know, double the other car, and killed my 2 dogs and broke my legs, So I don't know why there is this big difference between the Northeast and Northwest. Because after North Miami Avenue to the I-95 is crazy. The noise and the speed. The children cannot go out anymore, no one. So, and look me, I got disability, so it's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any further public comment? Come on. If you can come to the microphone, it's better because we can keep it on the record. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Vanessa. I live in 85 West 101 Street. My situation is, for 2 years, my neighbor started to deposit a lot of material construction, dirty thing, a lot of garbage. Every single day, when I open my door, where I found it, over to the water meter, is a lot of, I can't explain to you where I found it there. And nobody saying nothing about that. I call the police. I make a report with the police. I make a report with the code enforcement. I call the county. And every single day I find a lot of, it's terrible. It's terrible. I'm only for my house. I already pay my house. I'm single woman. I'm 65 years old. I'm tired about the situation. Somebody has to do something because there's too much. It's too much. Now, you pass to front of my house. It's terrible where you found it there. In the past, I was called the county because that family have a boat with no cover. They have a lot of mosquitoes. They come into my house, 2 rats, big rats like this. Raccoon, the sniper, they come into my house. And every single day I clean my garden, put in water. I try to put in my house pretty because I love Miami Shore. This is the reason I never moved for here. But that's too much for me. When I found it every single day across to my door, and the metal, the water meter, they put a lot of garbage. That's bacteria coming into the water. Everybody drinks the water, washing the teeth, They take a shower, they cook with us water. Everybody in Miami Shore contamination with us water dirty. Because that family, every single day, is like laughing about me. Anytime in the day, in the night, it's terrible. They don't give me any break. So I'm so tired about that. So I need somebody do something here, please, please, please. Okay, because I can't. It's too much for me. The reason when I live in Miami Shore is because I want to live in clean, pretty place. And I pay a lot of money here. So somebody has to do something, please. Do you know the address what is, right?
Yes, you emailed me last week too, and I wrote you back.
receiving my mail,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we got
You
it.
too, right? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but somebody has to help me. I'm a woman and I'm living alone. I'm single. I don't have nobody help me. It's the reason somebody has to do something. I'm sorry, but that's too much for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment?
My name is Oscar Sestoki. I live in 9716 Northeast Fifth Avenue Road. I came for other things, but just I've lived here for 15 years. Love it. Children grew up here. Very happy here. It seems like over the years the trains have gotten louder. Is it just, has that been addressed? This is my first time coming.
No, that's okay. Thank you for coming. Come on, give it to me.
And I have young children, and I wish, I know it was brought up, I know, bring up things, the rec center to be knocked down and built new. I've run rec centers for the city of Aventura for many years, and I would like to see nice things come to Miami Shores where I love, you know, and want to hang out and I go to the Citadel, even though it's nice that it's close, to have those things come here. But anyway, so the main thing I just wanted to ask about that and the water thing coming up. But the train has gotten louder and louder, and it wakes me up. Got the raccoon eyes. Not only the raccoon, I don't have animals, so I step in raccoon dew in my yard. But they don't last because we warm them up a little bit before coming. But anyway, so that's what it was. Just the train whistles have gotten really, really loud.
Okay. I'll follow up with you afterwards. Thanks.
Hello, how are you? Manny Haddad, 9820 Northeast Fifth Avenue Road. So I live approximately 5 houses further east from you, and I actually come here for another item. But you're absolutely right. The frequency of the train has exponentially increased because Brightline runs 2 trains an hour, one northbound, one southbound. And Brightline met with us. I know that the city arranged a meeting with Brightline last summer, or actually last spring. And by, I think it was last summer, maybe even the summer before that, they were supposed to have a quiet zone established in Dade County. My understanding from our neighbors is that, you know, they're just misinformed. Nobody knows why Brightline hasn't actually come through with the I guess requirements for the quiet zone. I know that on 95th Street there's not 2 barricades on both sides, which I think is a requirement for a quiet zone. They just have 1 barricade on both sides of traffic, eastbound and westbound. So I would like the council, city manager, whomever, to please follow up with that, because the noise is exceptional. There's one guy that, I mean, in the evening, I guess it's that midnight train, that guy just sits on his horn. They're required to blow 2 long horns, 1 short one and 1 long one. This guy just sits on it, you know, the whole time. And it is really a huge nuisance for us. So anything that you guys can do, please do that. And please inform the community through Nextdoor and whatever, and let us know. Because I know on Nextdoor there's a lot of emails or what have you along about this topic. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, we're going to close public comment, and actually, I think that would be a great subject to, like, some sort of update to put in the village newsletter, because we're waiting on other stuff to happen throughout the county, because they have to essentially permit the entire county first and present it to Miami-Dade County before they can get final approval on the quiet zone. So we're you know, this is total Federal Transit Authority, Federal and we're at their disposal on this, unfortunately. But the end is in sight.
Consent agenda. Items are routine and self-explanatory matters and are not expected to require discussion or review. Items will be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by any member of the council, that item must be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. If the public wishes to speak on a matter on the consent agenda, they must inform the village clerk prior to the start of the meeting. They will be recognized to speak prior to the approval of the consent agenda. Item 6A, approval of the March 19, 2019 Village Council meeting minutes. Item 6B, a resolution of the Village Council of Miami Shores Village, Florida, creating budget amendment number 2 to the fiscal year 2018-2019 operating budgets, transferring $121,646 from the non-departmental contingency account in the general fund to various departmental payroll accounts, transferring $3,387 from the local option gas tax fund contingency account to various payroll accounts, transferring $2,243 from the transportation surtax fund contingency account to the various payroll accounts, transferring $1,878 from the stormwater fund contingency account to various payroll accounts, transferring $23,947 from the sanitation fund contingency account to various payroll accounts, and transferring $5,370 from the fleet maintenance fund contingency account to various payroll accounts. Mr. Mayor, I have not received any items or any requests from the public to pull any of the items.
Great. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
I'd like to move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
An ordinance of the Village Council of Miami Shores Village, Florida, amending Appendix A, Article 5, Establishment of Regulations, Division 17, Section 536, Design Standards, Subsection 7, allowing the use of synthetic turf, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. This item is sponsored by Councilman Jonathan Meltz. Staff on this item is the Planning and Zoning Director.
Mr. Kendall? Mr. Meltz? I don't know, Mr. Meltz, if you'd like to introduce the item, or Mr. Kendall, whatever you prefer.
Sure, I'm going to defer to Mr. Kendall on it. I will just ask him to specifically point out what was added since last time for the benefit of the people who are following closely at home.
Okay. Travis Kendall, Planning and Zoning, good evening. Just as as we get into this, the council directed me last week to go ahead and add a section for artificial turf potentially to be used in the front yard, and while that seems very, very easy to do, it's actually more complicated than one might think. Only so much as the requirements for artificial turf in the backyard are completely different than the requirements that would be required for artificial turf between pavers. And the reason why is because the attachment, the substrate that goes underneath it, the material that's underneath it, and basically there's two types which can be used in a driveway. It's either a permeable or a non-permeable type, and both will actually have different installation requirements. First off, and within the package yourself, I handed you sort of like a quick summary and what they look like, and the two different installation types. This information has also been given to the clerk, and we'll put up on the webpage for people to see next week. Now, moving forward, basically the difference is the length and type of the material. While it can be the same as that which is used in the backyard, cannot be the same pile length because vehicles that drive on it would compress it. So, for example, in the backyard, we have 1 3/4 to 2.5 inch minimum. You can't use that same length in the front yard because if you do and you drive on it, it simply mats it down and then it wouldn't look appropriate for the front yard. So as a result, the range which is being proposed for the front yard is 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches. As well, there's a recessed requirement where the artificial turf will be installed slightly lower than the actual concrete on the driveways, which will allow for compression and still give preventing sort of trip hazard, which is the standard within the industry because you don't want people walking across there and tripping. There are some technical aspects which were added having to do with if you're going to use a permeable type, which basically means that the water can percolate through, that it requires a nailer, a specific type of nailer, and the number of nails and attachments so that it's not visible in the seams, for example. So there's some technical aspects that were added in there. In addition to that, if you choose to have the solid or non-permeable type, It says that you have to use a certain adherence and types of pressure so that it allows for it to adhere properly to the material. So that's sort of a quick summary. The information is contained within the ordinance. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions about it.
Mr. Kendall,
Sir.
I do have, when you said front yard, we're not proposing that people can put
No.
turf all over the front of the yard. Actually, this is probably a good example here.
It is. It's a very good example. And within that area, yes, it is specific. This ordinance is specific only to the driveway and the permitted driveway areas within a front yard.
Okay, and just for the benefit of everybody sitting here, just so you know a little bit of the historical aspect of it, this came up because many residents had contacted us that, especially in the backyard, in the shaded areas of your backyard, they've tried for years to grow grass, and it's turned into basically a mud pile. And then for their children, for their dogs or animals, whatnot. And we looked at other communities, and all across the board, other communities have been doing this for years. And so we can't just allow our residents to break our code, break our law. Therefore, we came forward with a proposal to make it legal to do what some residents have been doing already, but to make sure they do it up to the code to protect not only their backyards, but your backyards and everything else that we do to ensure the safety and welfare of the citizens. So that's where this is all coming up. This has already been proposed to us, which coming here again now on, I guess, first reading?
Yes, this is first reading, and there will be a second reading. So if there are any substantial changes which need to be made, we can certainly do that between first and second. In addition, one important thing that I would note, within this ordinance, the maximum width of the permitted area is 6 inches. So, and there's some examples of that. What you don't want is the driveway area to be, for example, what we've seen, which would be ribbons in the front, and 6 feet of artificial turf on either side of it. This is specifically for the driveway, which is shown here in an example, which basically allows for, yes, exactly. No, that would not be permitted. I was showing different examples of widths between 6 inches and up to about 24 inches. So this ordinance allows for a maximum of 6 inches between the design, basically. Because if you really once you get past about 6 inches, you can actually plant standard grass and be very successful in maintaining that, basically. So.
Thank you. Council, any questions, Mr. Kendall?
Just one. Has planning and zoning taken this up since then, or discussed it since the last discussion that I remember was probably a year ago?
In bringing this forward, yes, they reviewed it, I believe, Mr. Attorney, 2-3 months ago we brought it? 2 months ago?
I mean, you got the report at the prior meeting when this was discussed. That wasn't a year-old P&Z discussion. If your question is, has P&Z discussed it since you all had your last meeting, the answer to that is no. Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they made their recommendation, you're doing what you want to do. I mean, you
Thank
could
you.
send it back if you like, but they'll just tell you the same thing they told you before.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, council? I have some comments. So, I don't know if you want to go forward with something first? Yeah.
Well, the second part of what I didn't say before, just a comment, is that some people may look at this and say it's not environmentally friendly. Most people look at the opposite, that you don't have to fertilize, you don't have to waste water. There's no problem with runoff of fertilizer into our water supply, things like that. So there is a lot of environmental benefits to this. It uses recycled materials. And I don't have anything in the game. I'm not doing it in my house, so I couldn't care less. This is a perfect issue that other residents have come forward, and we have to take the steps to basically do what's right for the residents. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but that's America. You don't have to do it in your backyard. Most times they say what you do in your backyard is your own business, as long as it doesn't affect other people. And so we're just making it, put it in our code to give people that personal aesthetic choice, whether you put up rose bushes or if you want to just put no bushes at all in your backyard, that should be your choice.
Thank
I
you.
have one thing.
Councilwoman, yeah, please.
Mr. Kendall, Do you communicate with code enforcement enough to know that there are a substantial number of residents already in defiance of this ordinance?
Well, I don't know that I would say substantial, but I do know that anytime that there's a code enforcement issue having to do with artificial turf, it generally gets referred to me. And I end up reaching out to the property owner or the homeowner to explain the situation because they're generally unfamiliar with that situation. We haven't had, it did come to a point probably about 6 or 8 months ago where we were not requesting or requiring the information as to what they were placing between the pavers when they would apply for a new driveway permit. That has since changed. It is a specific question that we ask when they come in, and as a result, it's alleviated that issue. We don't have that problem anymore, but yes, there was properties, and people still inquire and say, well, why can't we do it? So, I mean, I will say that there is definitely some interest in the more modernized driveway, and we see this quite frequently now. I mean, this design, what you see up here, is probably I would say 30 or 35% of all new driveway permits are requesting this type of design.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I don't have any questions. I just have a couple comments on the issue. First of all, you know, I think I've been pretty consistent. So I was willing to support it.
Do you like these?
No, I don't. I was willing to support it in the backyard. I understand, you know, the idea of, you know, wanting to have space in the backyard, especially if grass can't grow for your kids to play, all that, where it doesn't, you know, in my opinion, sort of ruin the aesthetic of the neighborhood, right? You know, I think it's kind of a slippery slope, right? Then you're going to have a shady spot in the front lawn, and why don't we let them put it, you know, the turf there? And I think that, you know, I've seen right down the street from me, if you put irrigation in under there, there's a house that's been there that has grass growing between. If you do the irrigation properly, I think grass can sustain itself. Problem is when people don't do that properly. So, and I think rock is a perfectly fine aesthetic solution too that doesn't, again, open this can of allowing people to put plastic grass in their front yard. But that being said, there are a couple things I think that could make this better. It's still probably not enough to get my support, but I don't think I would allow the impermeable installation in driveways. Glue is going to fail. I just don't think glue is sustainable, you know, especially in our climate and the rain and the heat and everything else. I just, from my perspective, and maybe Mr. Kendall wants to opine. He looks like he wants to say something. Do you want to say something? I mean, that seems, you know, gluing it to boards in South Florida, I mean, that's going to fail. It's going to create a real headache for our code trying to say, well, is it failed enough to write somebody up? I mean, it just seems, you know, that seems crazy. And it also doesn't currently say if you're going to put it in between these pavers that you're going to require, if they have had irrigation in there, that they take that irrigation out first. And I could just see residents going ahead and putting this stuff right on top of that irrigation and then, you know, rotting it from the underside upwards, right? You know, I know it seems like common sense, but, you know, it's not. But those are my thoughts on it. I again, completely understand it and know that there are residents that want this. It's just not my cup of tea. But anyway. Any other comments, council? No? Anybody want to make a motion on this?
I'll move forward the ordinance on first reading, as stated.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Call the question.
Did you want to give a public comment on this, even though it's first reading?
Yeah, I mean, if the public would like to comment on this, we'll open it up. Public comment on first reading, if anybody has a comment. Come on up. Yep.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Aileen Wilson. I live at 189 Northwest 92nd Street, Miami Shores, 30 years. Listening to what you're saying here, I'm not understanding where the artificial grass is here. Between the pavers.
Right in that little section.
Okay. Because I've been here so long and I've gone through all of these iterations, I think that, you know, if someone wants to do that, but I think that needing to just do what you need to do to make it look nice and natural, it looks artificial, especially now that I'm seeing this. It looks like fake, and it just doesn't look right to me. But that's my opinion, and nobody has to agree with that. But I don't understand this. I don't understand this. And now that you know I know it's just that, I was like, is that all artificial grass there? And where they're speaking about it at? That's all I have to say. It's fake.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody else? If not, I'm going to close. Okay, I'm going to close public comment on that ordinance. And is there any other further comment, council, or we'll call the question? Yep. Okay. Yep.
No, I think that the mayor's comments about the impermeable surface and the, putting stuff to wood, I mean, would council be open to revising that portion of the, of the ordinance so that the, in the front, it would require it to be, the permeable and attached with nails is something that's a little bit more durable? That, to amend the ordinance just within that regard.
Yeah, I meant to ask Mr. Kendall's opinion. I didn't hear what he said after Mr. Mayor had brought those issues up, because I think those are valid concerns, and if there's something you've already looked into, Mr. Kendall, if you wouldn't mind enlightening us.
No, I don't. And in reviewing this and doing the research for this, generally, you're only talking a very small area of non-permeable area that normally is non-permeable anyway in the driveway, truthfully, because most of the time people would have a hard non-permeable surface for the entire driveway. So the fact that whether there's, it's really the issue of adherence than it is percolation and drainage, because realistically people would have a driveway there anyway, whether it be pavers or concrete or asphalt. So this option, I mean, if council is concerned with the ability to drain for that portion or that small portion within the driveway, then they should eliminate the non-permeable option and go with the pervious one only. It's certainly something for your consideration.
What do you think about the blue?
Oh, my.
Had to work that one in there. I'm not going to opine on that as to the quality and character and materials for the glue.
Are you confident that code would have an ability to enforce if the wear and tear after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, something to be able to compare, or you're not confident about that?
I believe it would be challenging.
That's what Mr. Mayor said also.
I believe that it would be challenging. I believe it would be challenging even if it were the permeable, truthfully, because unless it was a trip hazard or a life safety issue or something along those lines, as to whether,
There are maintenance standards in here, and as with so many of the other things we have, yes, there's some degree of a judgment call, but the way the system's set up, they generally err on the side of the property owner, and if it gets to looking really bad, then a majority of the board generally agrees it's got to be dealt with.
Okay.
Can I make a comment or not?
Not at this moment. Thank you. Yeah.
Why would you want to put a nail in the driveway?
Not right now.
Because we own a tire store.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, was there a motion to amend it, or?
I was kind of just, if it's in the opinion of the planning and zoning director that there's not necessarily a lot of utility to doing that, then I'm fine with leaving it as is. But I just wanted to make sure that we address those concerns. But as to the attorney's comments, there are standards in here for maintenance and gives it some guidelines for how it would be enforced. And I would say this is something that I don't personally would not do at my house, but have had many residents, like you were saying, reach out, especially the issue of the strips between the driveways. So no, so I'm fine right now. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll call the question then. All those in favor of the ordinance on first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay.
Item 7B, an ordinance of the Village Council of Miami Shores Village, Florida, amending Article 4, Commercial Photography and Filming of the Code of Ordinances, establishing criteria, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, repealing all ordinances inconsistent herewith, and providing for an effective date. This item is sponsored by Councilwoman Birch, and staff on this item is the village manager.
Yes, Councilwoman?
It would appear to me that most of the public is here for stormwater.
Yeah, why don't we move that?
Can
up?
we move that?
That'd be fine if
Okay.
that's all right with you?
Yes.
Okay. We're gonna go ahead then, and we'll come back to 7B in a moment, but let's go on to item 8A, if that's okay, Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the Miami Shores Village, Florida, providing for the levy and collection of non-ad valorem assessments for maintenance, operation, construction, and repair of the village's stormwater management system, providing for the levy and collection of non-ad valorem assessments for fiscal year 2019-2020, providing for the continuation of the assessments from year to year, providing for certification of the stormwater maintenance non-ad valorem assessment using the uniform tax book collection method, providing for amendments to Chapter 20, Article 5 of the Village Code of Ordinances, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for an effective date. This item is sponsored by the village manager.
Okay, Mr. Village Manager?
Yes, sir. As the clerk stated, we're here tonight to hear the second and final reading of a proposed rate increase to our stormwater utility fee. We have here tonight representatives from Stantec Consulting, who we have hired in order to do a complete analysis of our stormwater program. They're going to explain it to you, and they're going to take you through the methodology that they use to come up with the proposed rates. And we'll be happy to answer any questions after that. So, Kelly, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. Good evening, council. Nice to see you again. As you know, it's common practice for local government to establish stormwater utilities to help fund the overall maintenance and operation of a stormwater system. There's approximately 150 stormwater utilities within the state of Florida, and Miami Shores has had some sort of a utility for close to 20 years. So this is not a new thing. Periodically, it's a best practice for communities to reevaluate their funding needs and look at their rates and their revenues, and that's what we've had the opportunity to help Miami Shores with. So this evening, we have a presentation. This is Kyle Stevens, and we're going to split up the presentation. Primarily, he's going to cover the revenue requirements that we looked at, a 10-year projection for Miami Shores, the impervious area, which is your billing unit, and the resulting assessment fee that we're recommending. And then I'll be covering the implementation steps for the council if they choose to approve it.
Okay. For the benefit of those on this side of the room, there are a bunch of seats over there, and you'll probably get a better view of the screen if you want to move over. It's completely up to you, but anyway. Or not.
Good evening, Council. Great to be here again and be happy to run through the key findings of our analysis that we've completed for the village. The first subject I want to cover is the revenue requirement, which said another way is how much money do we need to run the stormwater system that the village manages. And so a little bit of the background, the stormwater utility in Miami Shores is housed within an enterprise fund. Much like your water and sewer system, the revenues and expenses are separate from the general government, and they can only be used to pay for stormwater related activities. There is a current assessment in place. It's $45 per ERU, and that represents roughly 2,466 square feet of impervious area. The current funding level has not been adjusted in, I believe it was over 10 years or so as we talked to staff. It currently only funds O&M with a little bit of capital every once in a while, but no major capital improvement projects are currently available to be funded with the stream that's in place. During the process, there were some identified needs that arose, and some of those that were key to the analysis were the 105th Drainage Street project. That is a $1.9 million project that was brought up for us to consider within the revenue sufficiency component of the analysis. Bayfront Park is actually a $3 million project, but the village has the ability to leverage a grant from the Inland Navigational District in Florida for $1.5 million. So effectively, you get half the project paid for from an outside funding source. And then additionally, we have considered some allotment on an annual basis for capital projects that are unplanned but routinely come up. French drains are one in this particular community that come up quite a bit and need to be addressed. And so what we've done is put together a 10-year cash flow forecasting model for which we could look at these various scenarios and work work with staff to come up with a plan to present here tonight. And so this next slide is the dashboard of the model we put together here that projects the revenue requirement and the needed increases, if any, to provide for a sustainable stormwater system. And so I'm just going to run through the key parts of this. Up in the left, we've got the operating fund here. And so this is much like your bank account. So looks at your net position, how much cash is available for us to use. And what we did in your particular case is you had about $1 million in the bank as of last year going into this fiscal year. We worked with staff to identify what's the necessary level of reserves that you would want to carry in each year. Utilities will typically carry money through time for unforeseen circumstances. One of the things that comes up a lot of times in Florida is hurricanes. And when they come up, you need some funding available, you need cash available to address projects. And so in your particular case, we've identified roughly $500,000 as a reserve to carry through the 10-year projection period. There is a bit of cash above that, and what we've proposed in this plan is for some of that to be deployed to help fund some of those capital projects that I just talked through. That is $500,000, a little over $500,000. So in addition to that cash, the current financial plan as proposed contemplates borrowing about $2.6 million to fully fund those capital projects, and that will be repaid over a 15-year period. In order to provide for the new debt service that would come on, the repayment of that debt, the stormwater revenue would need to increase next year by 125%. And so this plan contemplates 125% increase in the revenue to provide for the payment of that debt service. And then in addition, in a long-term basis, what we want to do is ensure that the fund is sustainable. And much like anything else that we see out in the world, prices tend to increase over time. And so we've contemplated on an annual basis small inflationary increases that would try to avert a structural deficit over time. So if costs increase and you don't adjust the fee, you would be in a deficit. What we're trying to do is get that cash in and that cash out on top of each other as shown here. The next part of the analysis covered the impervious area. And so impervious area for stormwater is the gold standard in the way to bill it. Communities will use several different yardsticks in order to measure the potential impact on the system. But stormwater is considered the gold standard for an individual parcel's potential contribution of stormwater to the system. There are 3,900 parcels or so in Miami Shores. And what we did is a ground-up update for each individual parcel to get a profile of the impervious area on those parcels. And we did that using a dual-prong approach. One was to leverage any data available from the Miami-Dade property appraiser. So they'll typically have building footprints, sheds, other ancillary structures. But in the case they're not available, if there is attributes that are impervious but not necessarily valuable, they may not have those, so we've used GIS in order to capture those impervious attributes. I'll give you an example of that. This is a property within the village, and I put a blue dot on the data that came directly out of the property appraiser. So you can see we picked up buildings and we're able to understand the square footage associated with those buildings, sheds. One that came up often was swimming pools and various other attributes of a parcel. Notably on this one right here, you can see in the middle one, the largest attributes in this parcel, the parking lot, is not captured. So what we did is we came back in, did a GIS analysis to understand how much square footage that's adding to the overall impervious footprint of the property.
Can you explain the acronym and what a GIS analysis means?
Yeah,
for
no,
the benefit of the
absolutely.
audience?
So
Yeah.
be happy to decode that one. So GIS stands for Geographical Information Systems, and it is simply a technical ability to be able to measure using remote sensing, so satellite imagery, LiDAR will come up, any kind of sensing that would look at the impervious area on a property.
Thank you.
Absolutely. With that analysis, we went parcel by parcel, updated the profile of impervious area, the billing units for stormwater, and within the village there is about 13.1 million square feet of impervious that can be billed as part of this analysis. So we've created a master billing file, and we've turned that over to village staff that shows the exact impervious per this measurement that we've conducted for the village. And then the last part of our analysis was the fee calculation. To start into that, what I've put together here is a survey which shows the village's current annual fee versus other peer municipalities. What we can see is currently you are toward the bottom end of the survey that we've conducted here on an annual basis. And we'll revisit this in a second as we move through the fee structure and come up to the updated fee in this survey. With regards to the fee survey, as I mentioned, there's currently a fee in place. It's $45 per about 2,466 square feet of impervious area, and I've shown this in the beige up here in this particular chart. I'm contrasting that above a distribution of impervious area per single-family homes right above that. And one of the key findings here as we looked at your particular community is there's a wide range of impervious area on parcels. They have very different footprints. Some are smaller, others are larger. And one of our recommendations as part of the study was to modify your current structure in order to give it more granularity, a shorter measuring stick, if you will, so we can pick up differences in this impervious area that we're seeing. And so the proposed structure is shown in these blue squares down below, which looks at each parcel for a block of 500 square feet of impervious area. So what we're able to do is better pick up on the lower end of this, smaller footprints that are below 2466. And properties that are above that, we're able to better zero in on the exact impervious area so that the fee better represents their potential contribution to the system. Now, the calculated fee, as I mentioned before, will have to include the needed revenue enhancement that was discussed in the revenue sufficiency, so 125%. The revenue will be collected by looking at the updated billing units for each parcel. All impervious area for a given parcel has been rounded to the nearest 500 square feet. So if there was, say, 1,020 square feet, we've rounded down to 1,000 square feet for the purpose of the calculation, which is a very common practice in the industry to round down to a customer-centric estimate of how much impervious is on the parcel. And the updated fee is shown below. You currently have $45 for 2,466 square feet. For the 500 increment that we're proposing, it would be $21.39, and that would recover that additional revenue need. So where does the rubber meet the road, per se? The next few slides here are just going to go through some of the impacts to different customer types within the village. And the first one I'm showing up here are single-family homes. And so go through this. The one starting on the left is a smaller footprint. So they have roughly 1,300 square feet of impervious area. And importantly, for this particular property, you can see the current structure would build in one ERU at 2,466 square feet of impervious. But by going to the smaller measurement of 500 square feet, we're able to recognize the fact that they have likely a smaller potential contribution to the system. And so the impact on that property, they would be $45 currently. Under the new structure, there would be a slight decrease, about 5% or $2.22 on that property. Taking a property right in the middle here, I've got 2,400 square feet. In that particular case, the current fee would go from $45 up to $85.56, or about an 85% increase for that particular property I've shown. And then I've got a larger example to the right, 4,900 square feet of impervious area. For that particular parcel, their fee would go from $90 up to $192, which is about 114% change from last year. Moving on to the non-single family homes, they're treated, or non-single family parcels, treated exactly the same. So the rate structure looks at how many increments of 500 square feet there are on these parcels. The first example I've got there is a smaller non-residential parcel. And down at the bottom, you can see the fee goes from $405 up to $898 under the proposal. It's about a 122% increase for that parcel. And over to the right, I've shown a larger example. Their fee goes from $675 up to $1,561, or 131% increase. And the last example that I've shown here is a condominium. They're a bit unique from the way that the assessment is levied due to the stacked units on the parcel. And so the way that a condominium or a stacked parcel is billed under the assessment is there is a calculation done of the full impervious area for the parent parcel. And then we look at the taxable units that reside on the property to actually assess the assessment. So in this particular case, there's 14 units, and you can see currently the billings, they're currently being billed for about 11,500 square feet of impervious. What we found is when we updated this, there was a bit more impervious on this particular parcel, about 14,000 once rounded down to the nearest 500. Dividing that by 14 units yields 1,000 square feet of billable impervious area per unit. And so looking at the current fee down below, they are currently at $1,607. Under the proposal, it would be $42.78, and the percentage 166, and that's because not only the revenue, but we picked up some additional billing units in that particular case. So for the average residential home, I've now updated the survey that I had before, and you can see under the proposal, the average residential home would move more toward the top end. And I think there's a couple key points when we look at these surveys. So one is, this is just indicative of the level of fees. The level of service is another discussion that each community is providing. And so one of the things that when we look at this, that's very notable is your peer communities toward the top of this list are facing very similar issues to you. So they are coastal. They have the influence of sunny day flooding, king tides that can become a problem, and I know the village is facing that, and these other communities are facing some of the very similar dynamics that require a different level of investment to address. So there's some of the key considerations as we digest some of this information with regards to the survey. With that, I'd like to transition back over to Kelly to talk about the implementation.
Great, thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
So there are a number of steps that the village takes to get to the November tax bill being sent to property owners. The first 3 you've already completed. Had the first public hearing, you mailed the notice, and we attended a public meeting last Monday. The next steps are April 2nd, tonight, our second public hearing. July 17th, the village will send the tax collector a draft billing file. August 24th, the trim notices are sent out. September 15th, they send the final billing file over to the tax collector. October 1st, those due rates are effective, and in November, the tax bill is sent. So like I mentioned, there was a public meeting that we attended, and I understand that the village has received some public comment as well. So subsequent to our last meeting when we were here, we've heard that there is a desire for a credit program. And so I just wanted to bring it to your attention that we'll be working with your staff and legal and our stormwater engineer that we have to flush out a credit program that would be coming back to you.
I think just for clarity, what we mean when we say a credit program is if a particular property is engaging in an activity for which they reduce their contribution to the system, so on-site attenuation or detention, those would be the particular types of credits that would reduce their bill.
Okay. Council, any questions? No?
Question,
Councilman?
going back to the chart that Kyle showed us with the different municipalities, I'm just sort of trying to understand why some places like an Aventura or a Doral or, Sunny Isles, which is obviously on the ocean, or a Golden Beach, which are all very affluent communities, would have a much lower amount, per home, the annual amount, where ours would be growing significantly. And I'm not saying that Pinecrest or Surfside are not affluent communities, but how can they maintain such a low annual amount?
Yeah, absolutely, and I can't speak to the exact circumstances that
Just
led
in
to the
general,
fee show, but
yeah.
some general comments that or thoughts that I might have on that. One is very similar to you. There can be long time delays between when communities will adjust the fees. So like we showed on yours, you hadn't adjusted it for a very significant amount of time. And when those needs catch up, they will often move quite far up on this list when they go to readjust the fee level. Additionally, they could be leveraging other funding sources other than the stormwater fee to help provide the level of service they are in the community. And so grants very much, like we mentioned earlier, that come up in certain communities, they can leverage those at higher levels. Or other, general fund, different other funding sources may come into play.
All right, thank you. No, I just thought that might be something that the folks might be questioning. I mean, Aventura, I know, has a lot of condominiums. Maybe that factors
Density.
into it as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say density, 100%.
As opposed to our density, which is all single-family homes for the most part, and lack of commercial areas as well, which would add a lot of revenue to the revenue stream for stormwater. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
Mr. Mayor, so if I could ask you to elaborate in common parlance on what exactly the stormwater dollar will do other than those 2 special projects that you mentioned, the day-to-day work of the stormwater dollar.
Yeah, absolutely. So the stormwater system that's in place is here to, and Tom, feel free to jump in as well. And I know you know your system best, but from our perspective, as we integrated with staff, Those stormwater dollars are first and foremost going to maintain the operations of the system and ensuring that it's efficient and moving water to the receiving body. And so as part of this study, the adjustment there is that you would have some dollars available on an annual basis to engage in some smaller capital projects, which will help out when you have things that come up that are not planned upon, or if you need to do additional studies for engineering purposes. But then the major adjustment that is shown here in the fee is to provide for those larger capital projects.
Thank you. Tom, maybe would you speak about the situation at both of the sites that are contemplated for the capital projects, and for the benefit of the folks who are in here who have not heard the last 3 years of discussion around these areas that are constantly flooding and are very problematic? I think maybe Tom ought to share it.
Yes, sir. We went about a year ago, we commissioned a vulnerability study, and we got the results of that back last summer. The number one area that was identified that we needed help with, and anybody that lives back there knows this, is the Shores Estates subdivision, also known as the area behind the old Kmart there. So it's north of the Biscayne Canal and west of Biscayne Boulevard, where the old motel used to be. That subdivision back there, on the king tides and on high tides, the water actually comes back up into the drain system and floods out the neighborhood back there. When it's high tide and there's any kind of a rain, and I know right now we're in the dry season, but give it a month or so, when we start getting rain throughout the summer months, it's miserable back there. You have standing water, you have garages flooding. When the king tide is there, if we don't go out there and actually plug the drains that are there now, the water will actually back up and flood garages over there. So that subdivision needs help. It needs a reverse pumping system put in there and a new drainage system. We're going to also have to look at perhaps raising the elevation of the roads as part of the installation of the drainage, because the area was just developed so low at the time it was developed that now with the sea level rise, and I don't know what's causing it, but I know that every year it's higher and higher and there's more and more flooding over there. So the council, being proactive, did the vulnerability study. They identified that area as area number one that we need to spend the money on. We had some preliminary studies done, and it came out to approximately $1.9 million. And as Kyle identified, that's one of the capital items that he has there, that this increase in stormwater money is going to fund. The next thing that we looked at was our Bayfront Park seawall down there. If you go down there during a king tide or even the very high tides that you see now, you will see that the grass is dead most of the time year round, because the salt water is coming and washing over the seawall, sheet flowing across the sidewalk, killing the grass and whatever vegetation is there, gets into our drain system there, and whenever we have any rain, the water just doesn't drain out. If you stand on, say, northeast 12th Avenue and you look east towards the bay, you'll notice the water all runs downhill there. The Bayshore Drive is significantly lower than 12th Avenue, so we had come up with the proposal to raise the height of the seawall to keep the water out. And as was mentioned in their presentation, there's a grant available from the Florida Inland Navigation District where we can get 50% of this raised seawall and raising up the height of the sidewalk and replacing the vegetation down there, paid for by FIND, Florida Inland Navigation District. Again, we estimate this to be about a $3 million project. We have budgeted $1.5 million, our 50% match, as part of this stormwater utility fee. We also plugged in there an additional $100,000 a year, because every year we get calls where sometimes a pipe will collapse in one of our French drains, where we'll have to go dig it up and repair it. We might identify an area where we'll get a resident that say, hey, I don't know why, but now it's flooding in my neighborhood and it never did it before. So we may need to go in there and install a single drain somewhere. And right now, we're actually upside down in our stormwater utility, revenue versus expenses. So this year, in order to balance the budget, we had to go to the bank and pull money out of the bank and budget and use that money to balance our budget. So that's anticipated in this as well. So that's where we're at and how we came up with these numbers.
Great, thank you. At this point, unless council has anything to add, I'm going to open it up to public comment now. I think you guys have a better sense of the issue. If you'll come up to the mic again and give us your name and address, and you know, and just to reiterate, like public comment up front, it's not question and answer. So make your comments. If you have questions to ask, we will do our best to answer it in our discussion after the fact. But it's 3 minutes a person. Name and address.
Okay,
Express your
Glenn
concerns.
Ivy, 1268 Northeast 93rd Street. My question is basically about the pump down at the end of 92nd Street. Last time we had a hurricane, there was about a foot of water came up there in my garage, and I understand the pump stopped working because of water. And I was just wondering if that pump has been repaired for hurricane season. That's a question for Mr. Benton to answer. And also, what is the plan for a new pump down there on 92nd Street? So if we get water coming over the wall again and it can't run back out because the wall is too high, what are you going to do down there for that whole area? That's basically my question for
Great.
Mr. Benton.
Thank you.
Dale Sims, 152 Northwest 110th Street. I have a concern, and that is in 32 years on the west of the shoreline, Miami Shores line, we've never seen any, we don't even have drains. Someone did a fabulous job of construction, engineering, where we have a soft bed of sand that if we got a hard rain, all these hard rains and everything, the water went right away. My concern is for the revenue for whatever it takes to, in Miami Shores, the west side of the shores still doesn't benefit from any of this, and we never have. And my concern would be for those residents on that side, on the west side of the shores, is that you all would give us some consideration too, because we don't even have a drain. When these sank, the figures came up of 2466 square feet. There's not a drain within 100 yards of my house, and never had one. And so when you're talking about revenue sharing, one of the reasons I purchased where I purchased, because I knew the elevation was higher, because I've worked at Beach High School for the last 32 years, and I've seen the problem they have on the beach. And it's unfortunate, and I really feel for you all that have that problem over there with the pumps, and it is a major expense. However, when you're talking about revenue sharing and $46 now increasing up to $100, up to $800, how does that benefit anyone on our side? I've always advocated for people in my neighborhood, and I still do. And it doesn't benefit us whatsoever. So my concern is, to me, Miami Shores has always been in three areas. I call it the East Shores, the Middle Shores, and the West Shores. The East has always benefited, and the West has never gotten anything. So as councilmen and councilwomen, we would like to see those of you that would be concerned about those issues that come up in the East Shores, the West Shores, the Middle Shores, as I stated earlier, that we get that consideration and not have to brunt all the, as much of the revenue sharing where we never get anything and benefit anyway. So that's my concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Manny Haddad, 9820 Northeast 5th Avenue Road. In reviewing Stantec's technical memorandum, it's my request that a provision be added to the ordinance reducing the assessment by the amount of the debt service of $241,577 of the debt service of the two major projects in which this assessment is financing. So or at a minimum, the level of this assessment be revisited yearly or after the debt service of the two major projects is satisfied. So in other words, this assessment right now is 45% of this assessment is going towards the financing or the debt service coverage of these two major projects. Once the payment of those two major projects, which includes almost $80,000 in interest yearly, once the debt service for those two major projects are paid for, there's really no reason, unless there's other projects that are needed in the community, for the assessment to be at the level that's being proposed currently. In addition, it's also proposed that the assessment be raised 2.75% yearly. So what we're paying today will amount to $546,975. In 10 years, it's going to amount to $698,239. So it's an increase of $150,000. So there is an increase that's already being taken into account for inflation or what have you. So that's my my conclusion, and thank you. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
Joe Schweiger, 1196 Northeast 97th Street. First, I'd like to apologize for my level of ignorance here, but I must confess the only notice I've ever received was this notice about a final hearing, so I was very much surprised, and I see from the presentation, though, that other notices were sent out. I don't know why I unfortunately didn't get them, otherwise I would have done a little bit more homework before arriving here today. Since this is not a give and take with question and answers, I'll just have to throw my comments out there and hope for an answer as the discussion continues. First, I'm still very much confused, and I appreciate your presentation, but impoverished area is still just as much a mystery to me, or impervious area, as it was before I walked in the room. The only thing I can see from the numbers I've seen is it looks like they've taken my assessment from the tax rolls, took the square footage that's under roof, and that's how they determined their 500 units and, come up with my assessment. Now, I don't know if this is correct or incorrect, or if I'm guilty of stinking thinking, but it seems to me that if someone has a two-story house and they've got 1,500 square feet on each level, they got a 3,000 square foot house, they're getting stuck for the same footprint of someone who only has a single-family home of 1,500 square feet. So I have a little problem understanding this and digesting it to fully appreciate where we're coming from. On one hand, it seems that the methodology has already been in place for years, and what you're really just doing is increasing the rate. So I'm not sure where any reassessment of the impervious area, if that was the right term again, is coming from. But it does make me question whether any of that is being reviewed for the standpoint of actually really determining this. You say you've looked at various structures, but I can tell from what you were putting up there, GIS, for instance, and I'm not trying to nitpick on something we discussed earlier, is not going to pick up the non-permeable turf that's maybe been put in people's backyards, which certainly seem to have an impact on the units of assessment that we're talking about. So this seems to me to be a completely overlooked type of unit or consideration. The second thing, well, not necessarily the second, but one of the other things that I just was a little bit concerned with is if this is going to be an ongoing project, that's fine and good. We need to do this for the safety and benefit of the community. I understand that. But I'm wondering if we're going to set this aside as a reserve, a dedicated source, because I just heard you take money from your contingency fund from stormwater to make up for what appears to be payroll deficiencies. So if we're going to have this kind of an increase. All right, well, then I misunderstood that. Thank you for clarifying that. But anyway, I still think it should be going as a dedicated reserve specifically to be funded for these types of projects so that it cannot be, attached by other council members down the road or whomever for other projects that may or may not have the direct impact that we're looking to resolve with this issue. I questioned one thing about the condos, but that's just a curiosity item because condos do their own assessments. If a condo property is being assessed a dollar amount, that is spread through the association fees to the individual units. So I don't understand this relationship of looking at how it impacts individual unit owners when the condominium, because the mechanism is already in place for assessments to a condominium to be passed on to its inhabitants.
Mr. Schweiger, your time has exhausted.
Very good. That was me and my comments.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Anybody else? Come on up.
Mr. Mayor, while she's doing that, can I just make one clarification?
Yes,
just to
Mr.
avoid
Finn.
confusion.
Yeah.
And it went past pretty quickly. There was a reference in the report, this is an enterprise fund. What an enterprise fund means in this context is this money can only be used for stormwater projects and purposes. There's no overflow. All the revenue that comes in for stormwater has to be used for stormwater purposes. So I didn't want anyone to get confused about that.
Hello again. My name is Aileen Wilson, ALINEWILSON. 30 years in Miami Shores. I live on that west side. There are no storm drains in my area. Every time it rains, I have a good 4 to 6 inches of water that accumulates across the sidewalk and in front of my house. Now, from what I'm understanding, and I may not understand it all, it does not sound like what's going to be done is going to benefit me. So logic to me, it's like, why should I pay double? And I'm not getting any relief. And I'm hoping that you all would consider that and maybe make some type of adjustments for those of us who will not benefit from that. My heart goes out to those who do have that situation, but I can't just keep reaching in my pocket. I'm retired now. My funds are limited, but it's not fair. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments?
Oscar Sestoki, 9716 Northeast Fifth Avenue Road. I lived in Aventura. They had floods there all the time. Still do probably. So I moved to Miami Shores. And before I purchased my home, my beautiful home, which should have been one day on the better homes of Miami Shores, because I take pride in my yard and trees and painting and everything. But anyway, I realized that before you go buy a home, go during a storm. And I did. And it was pouring raining. And I went and where I bought my house at 9716, everything, there was no standing water, nothing. And the only standing water that I experience is because my landscaper runs over my sprinklers, so when I turn them on, my sidewalk floods because of the sprinklers. And I turn them off because I gotta get them repaired for the umpteenth time. But as you're right, it's not fair because we don't have flooding in that area. I've never had flooding. That's why I purposely bought there. And so that's why this is new to me now. Now that I'm going to be more involved over the years that I'll be coming to these things. And but do consider that why should we have to pay quadruple, double, triple, whatever, because it doesn't affect me. And I feel for you who it does flood. And maybe it should just be isolated in those two areas, by the bay or by over there by the old hotel, that whatever they're going to turn that into. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Councilwoman, thank you for your time.
Lou Perez, 145 Northeast 103rd Street, 103rd Street State Road. Although the drainage there is maintained by FDOT. And I was hoping that maybe some consideration be given, being that people that live on state roads and that kind of thing aren't getting the benefit from this expenditure. So even though, as Tom stated in the community meeting that we had last week, it's a cup of coffee, the increased amount. But the point is that if I don't get benefit from the stormwater community in the shores, because where I live, then maybe that needs to be also looked at. Not for just myself, obviously, for all the people that live in these state roads, being 103rd, 95th, perhaps even 6th Avenue, those roads that are really not part of the system in the village. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Can I have 10 seconds on that?
No, yeah. Sorry. So we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing on this. And I'd like to just make a couple comments myself, just to give everybody a little bit of extra background here on the subject. You know, for 2 years now, we've sought relief for these problems, right? We've gone to the federal government, we've gone to the state government, we've gone to the county, we've looked for grants, and there is nobody coming to our rescue, right? And what we have here is we have a community, our neighbors, who pay taxes, who are flooding, who did not know that there was going to be sea level rise when they bought their homes, that they would have sheet flooding on sunny days, and their houses are being ruined, right? These are our neighbors. And frankly, we have a very limited amount of tools in our tool belt to help these folks out, right? This area behind Kmart is the area I'm speaking of in particular. There are people that during Hurricane Irma had their houses completely flooded out, people with families that had to, leave their homes with their young children with no money to do anything about it. Now I know, Lord knows, I don't want to pay any more taxes any more than the next person, and this is a tax. But frankly, if we start worrying about, just my side of the community or my block or my side of the street, that's that's just not what this community is founded on. This is, a community, we're neighbors, we have a situation here, and we don't have any other alternatives. The alternative is to let that neighborhood continue to flood. And what happens then is those people sell their homes, right? And all of a sudden that tax base and that part of the village goes away. And you know what? Then we all feel it, don't we? It's not just a matter of community then, it's a matter of tax dollars going away. We have a limited tax base as it is. Now this is not intended to lecture or anything, but I'll tell you, the people up here have struggled with this issue for years now. And, this is one of the very few solutions that we have to addressing this problem. Now, Bayfront Park is another issue. That's city-owned property, right? And that floods during sunny days, right? We have an opportunity here, if we raise this money, to get a matching grant, right, that'll help pay for and address this problem. I 100% hear the concerns of everybody in this room, and I respect your concerns, and I don't mean to be insensitive, but we're up against a wall here, right? We don't have a lot of other options, and if you think, I heard the concern about the escalation. If you think that sea level rise and climate change issues are going to get better, you're mistaken, and we're not just talking about actual ocean rise. We're talking about torrential rains. We're talking about flash flooding. There's increased precipitation that's already been documented as a result of all the melting at the ice caps. This is coming, and it's coming very rapidly now. And we can either prepare for it now, or we can just and address it now, or we can just let it slowly deteriorate. And anyway. I'll defer to the council and see if they have anything to add.
So I have a couple of comments related to the comments that we heard. And I'm particularly sensitive because I spent a lot of time walking around over on the west side. And I know that the west side has its own set of problems.
Yeah.
It's not flooding, it's other things. And I saw them, and we know about them. And when we start a project, a public works project in this village, it starts on the west side, 100% of the time. But I heard Ms. Wilson say that she was standing in water. Well, at the same time, I heard that Mr. Sims say that he's never been standing in water. I know from time to time, these things change, patterns change, someone builds a new house or changes the structure or something, and you may need a French drain. So we don't know what your needs in the future are going to be, but we as government officials, we have to balance that budget. We have to make sure that we have enough money in stormwater to cover the stormwater job that we do as a village. And it is a dedicated fund, and we only use that fund. And if we got $270,000 and we needed 307, then we're at a deficit, and we have to make that up. There are other areas where we see deficits, and we have to make it up no matter which particular street or residence that you make it up in. We can't discriminate according to that. And what these folks have done, we have asked them to do, is make a fair assessment going forward so we can plan for the future. We don't feel good sleeping at night if we're in charge of this and we are not making plans to change to better the infrastructure. This is infrastructure we don't see. If your drain over there, or if any portion of the stormwater system is gonna collapse, you're not gonna see it. We're just gonna need to repair it, and right away, because you can't tolerate living in a place where the stormwater drain has collapsed. Okay, so that's important for you to understand. You did say, there will be flooding in any section of the shores. And I'm sensitive to what you're saying, because my in-laws lived at 170 Northwest 105th Street since it was built in 1948. And they built there because they knew they were on higher ground and they wouldn't have a flooding difficulty. But we have to manage the entire village. We can't just manage that one part. There are needs that you have. I walked on some sidewalks on the west side that are like rubble that need to be fixed so badly that I practically planted my face in several times in that section that I was going through. Well, we have to fix that. It doesn't come out of stormwater, but it comes out of other funds. And I just think it's only fair that you understand what these other sections of the community are going through. So thanks for listening.
Council, other comments? Yep, Councilman.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Before I joined the council a couple of years ago, I heard citizen resident complaints that the council wasn't looking forward to protect the community. Sea level rise was coming, climate change is coming, and it came really fast. That seems like what we talk about all the time. So council was being blamed for not being proactive, not looking to the future to protect you all and that sort of thing. So this last 2 years, I can say each and every person up here has worked really hard to try and come up with a plan so we're not caught with our, down. And so this is part of that plan. And as much as I live closer to Ms. Wilson and Mr. Sims, and I don't particularly see a flooding issue in my neighborhood, I fully understand I can't pick and choose what's best for this community based on what I'm going to get out of it. And I don't want to pay more money either. And just pick anything we have here. I don't know, do you go to the dog park? Do you go to the library? Do you go to recreation or those sorts of things? But that's part of being in this community, right? And this is, as I think Councilwoman Birch had said, it's a struggle for us. But we're looking to do what's best for Miami Shores. And we know we're not going to make everybody happy. That's an impossibility. But don't think we're just doing this haphazardly. And just because it's today something that you don't see outside your front door, what about tomorrow or next week? And then we're going to have the east side come in and say, whoa, you're doing something for the west side. And it's just not how it works. We have to do, I think it said it was a balance. What's in best interest? And I'm waiting for somebody to tell me that sea level rise and climate change is not going to affect Miami Shores. And then we'll just rip this up. But we're trying to do something to protect this community as a whole. And this is part of it.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other comments? Councilman? Yep.
I think you've all stated it so eloquently. I mean, this is something that benefits the entire village. And whether or not you have a problem in your front yard or you don't, I mean, this is going to be something that's going to raise the property values for everybody in this village. And I think the mayor said it correctly. If we don't address it, you're going to have property values going down. It's the same with every other facility and public improvement that is done or not done in this village. The sewer, project that we completed recently, the downtown redevelopment that is hopefully happening, perhaps someday your community center. All those things are going to benefit everybody, not just the people who have the problem at the time. So, and I agree with everything that's been said, and I'm fully in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, I'd like to make just one more point following up on what Mr. Zelkowitz said. Nobody's really mentioned this yet, but our existing stormwater system covers things like the village streets. You don't want flooded streets. Unless you're not going to use any of the streets in the village, you can't really say this doesn't benefit me. And the existing system, if I understood it correctly, is not generating sufficient money to cover the existing operations and maintenance of just what we have. This is not just about some special projects we want to do. Yes, being proactive, and you're looking forward to things that need to be done. But even if we didn't do any of that, we still need to raise the rates just to balance the budget on what we're doing today.
Right. Great point. And I am, because we've been focused on those projects, but your point is well taken. That was one of the things that came up in the course of the study. We don't have the funds to maintain our current system. Mr. Vice Mayor?
No, I was just ready to make a motion on approving the ordinance on second reading.
Okay. I'll second it.
Okay.
The motion is second. Is there any further discussion on the ordinance? No? I'll call the question. All those in favor of the ordinance on second reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ordinance passes.
Back to 7B. An ordinance of the Village Council of Miami Shores Village, Florida, amending Article 4, Commercial Photography and Filming of the Code of Ordinances, establishing criteria, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, repealing all ordinances inconsistent herewith, and providing for an effective date. This item is sponsored by Councilwoman Burge, and staff on this item is the village manager.
Mr. Manager, do you want to start it off, or Councilman? Whatever you prefer.
No, go ahead. Ladies first.
When we first went over this ordinance and discussed it, a couple of facts emerged. The facts from the homeowners, and there are not that many of them who avail themselves of commercial filming, as well as the input from staff, how the ordinance as it existed was not particularly easily transferable to what the film industry and the resident were asking for. So I must say that I think this new ordinance, as it's crafted, is far superior. It's full of definitions so that it helps the management and staff when there's a proposal to have residential filming or still photography. And when the ordinance is crafted in such a way that it satisfies the residents and the staff's ability to interpret the ordinance, then I think it's much better. And I think it goes along with what Councilman Meltz has said several times. If it's something that you can't comply with or you don't comply with, then you had better change it. And I believe this is a much better guideline for our staff as well as for the residents who are obtaining these permits.
Thank you. Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to appreciate staff did a chart, and we always ask for a framework of what other communities are doing with regard to an issue. It gives you a baseline and an idea that you don't want to over-regulate, you don't want to be big government. I can tell you, I was shocked at the findings that it appears there's only 2 other or 3 other communities which limit the number of days that you can issue permits for, or maximum number of days. It's almost like the Wild West out there, that most communities say, yeah, do whatever you want to do. Just pay us our fees. So I think that's a lack of concern for the residents. And there's 2, 4, 6 that don't even charge. They just, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and we won't even charge a fee for provide for whatever services. So I do appreciate that we're writing this. I'm not particularly enthused with the amount of days that you can shoot. I think it's high, just on a common sense approach, but it appears to be less of a maximum than the other 3 communities, if you see what I'm saying. So I'm going to defer to how it's written. I haven't heard any concerns about the neighbors to these houses saying, hey, there's crews here ruining my quiet enjoyment of my house. I don't know if you've all gotten any concerns from anybody. So I'm going to sit back and defer to how it's written. I'm not going to over-government, over-regulate, and I guess I support it.
Okay. Comment on this or not?
No.
Okay.
You know what, it is an ordinance on first reading, but we'll open it up for public comment. Let me get a couple more comments in from the council. Hold on, just 1 second. Let me get a couple more. Yeah, and please, don't do that. So, is there any other council comment? Okay. Why don't you come on, up? If you can come up to the microphone, though, that'd be great.
Stay up there. Glen Ivy, 1268 Northeast 93rd Street. Now, at the end of my street, we have the Pink House. It seems to be that this is the favorite place for commercials and videos and all of that other sort of thing. And it seems to be a perfect place because next door to me, they tore the house out and now there's a yard there, you know, and they just use that to park all the vehicles in. And I thought there was some sort of rule that you could only film, you know, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. What is the rule on it? Does anybody know? How many times can you film?
We have an existing ordinance.
Yes.
Proposing to amend the ordinance.
Yes, what's the existing?
I don't have it.
Okay, what's the amendment?
So it's not question and
Okay,
answer, 'cause
all right,
it's okay,
all
it's
right,
okay.
but,
Yep.
you know, we're down there, that's the hot spot that everybody wants to come to, and so, we haven't had any trouble down there, but, there's potential and, you know, it's always the thing. And some of the times they never come around and say, oh, we're gonna film, you know, in a week. They may just show up in the morning. So I think your people are weak on giving these people the information that they need, and I would say less filming, the better.
Okay, great.
If you want to see what's
Thank
being
you.
proposed, here's a copy.
Okay, thanks.
It's on the website.
Great. Any other comment? All right, we're going to close the public hearing on that. So I just had a questions. You know, this idea of it's not until it's 3 consecutive days or longer. It needs to be approved by majority of the affected property owners. Is that consistent with what other cities do? I didn't see that in the spreadsheet because, I mean, 3 kind of seemed, frankly, a little short, you know, 5 days or 7 days. I mean, no, yeah, 3 is 3 pretty common.
Yeah, 3, and the industry has never complained about 3.
Okay.
They complain about the frequency, but not about,
The
you
nu-
know,
okay.
yeah, they usually can wrap it
Yeah,
up.
and I
in
think
a-
I was absent for the first time this issue was discussed, so I'm not as versed in it as some of the others. And the other question was about the lateness. You know, 10 o'clock on the weekdays, 10 o'clock at night, and 11 o'clock on Saturdays. Is that something that was discussed? I mean, that seems a little on the late side for a bedroom community. I don't know.
I don't remember it being discussed.
Yeah.
Well, I do remember it coming up. What they were saying was that there needed to be certain parts of time, portions of time, that they would be able to get their equipment out of there in time so that they're not
And
going
associated work.
past.
Yeah. Okay. So they're out by 10. or 11.
Exactly, that's, yeah.
Those are my only questions. Council, any other comments, questions, statements?
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we move the resolution and the ordinance.
I'd second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the ordinance on first reading, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Hang on. There's 2 things that were in this packet for that. There was the ordinance,
And
and there was a resolution.
I just said,
Oh, you did both, I missed
I
it.
just said both,
Okay,
resolution and the
the
ordinance.
resolution really needs to wait for the second reading, because it's authorized by the ordinance.
Okay.
So I got you both ways.
Of all.
All right. I knew there was a reason.
So do we need to redo that motion?
My understanding was that was the intent of the motion, right?
Okay.
There you go. We'll leave it to the clerk to make the minutes perfect.
Item 9A, discussion regarding the Miami Shores Elementary School curriculum. This item is sponsored by Mayor McAdam Glenn.
Okay, this is a follow-up to our last meeting, and the discussion we had around perhaps enhancing the curriculum at Miami Shores Elementary and making an investment over there. And I wanted to start off because I heard something at the candidate forum at the rec center, and I think that there's a misconception out there about this item, and I wanted to clarify it. This is not aimed at undermining the efforts, the good efforts that the principal or staff are doing over there right now. I'm excited as anybody to hear about the things they're doing with STEM and other progress that they're making, and we want to continue to partner with them. That's not the intent here. But that being said, there is a clear desire by the parents in this city, in this village, to have increased academic rigor at Miami Shores Elementary School. They made it clear in the advisory board survey, and they've also voted with their feet. I want to remind everybody, barely 50% of the public school students, people who go to public schools in Miami-Dade County, go to Miami Shores Elementary. That excludes private school kids, right? Just 50% of the kids that go to public schools somewhere in Miami-Dade County actually go to Miami Shores Elementary. Of Miami Shores residents, yes, sorry. With that in mind, I think that there is a path forward as a result of my conversation, the manager's conversation, then our collective conversation with school board staff forward. And the idea is that we would create a choice program at Miami Shores Elementary School rather than a magnet, and the students in the school's boundaries could choose to be a part of it. And Dana Vignali from the Educational Advisory Board, who also works at the school board, can explain that differential in a second. But I had a call late this afternoon from the superintendent on what they were willing to commit to at this point, and pretty exciting. I think I want to share that before we come up and talk about definitions. But they basically called and said that we're on the same page in terms of curriculum and approach. And they have supported the idea of simultaneously making it an iPrep and a Cambridge school, which is awesome. Accordingly, the school would be both an iPrep school, embracing their manner of utilizing technology, spaces, and collaborative teaching, while also being a certified Cambridge program and giving our students the opportunity to learn in that academically rigorous environment. The name of it and how it is branded is still a matter of discussion, but we could envision something along the lines of iPrep North at Miami Shores Elementary, a Cambridge program, something like that, which is pretty exciting. Our investment, and this is, I think, kind of the best part, for that level of change and investment from the school board, would be a one-time contribution of around $96,000. That's it. Yep. We still have to determine at the end of the day if we would rather phase the program in one grade at a time, starting at the bottom, or go all in and begin to make the improvements across the board immediately. The superintendent suggested he is willing to entertain either approach, depending on what we want to do, moving in with kindergarten first, second, or just, bringing it all in all at once. I've also expressed my concern that there are parts of the shores west of Northwest 2nd Avenue that currently fall outside the borders of Miami Shores Elementary. My neighbor's here. I lived there for 8 years. My kids' homeschool was Sibley. And I think that's unacceptable, especially if all the taxpayers of Miami Shores are making this investment. They encouraged us to work through the next round of the school boundary drawing process to address this issue going forward, and they seem to think that there was an opportunity there to make a change. But in the interim, those students that are in that area can apply through the regional transfer program. They stated that there is room at that school right now to get into Miami Shores Elementary, and they are looking at what they can do to help facilitate it besides the standard regional transfer points. But so once those issues are resolved, all that is left is to work through the final, work through the final interlocal agreement. As I see it, we have 3 options at this point. We can, based on our vote at the last meeting, we can give guidance to the manager on these subjects and have him negotiate and bring an agreement back to the next council to vote on. Or we can pass a motion of support for these items to be conveyed to the next council and allow them to decide whether they want the manager to move forward. Or number 3, we can completely defer to the next council on whether to move forward at all on this item. And that's the way I see it. And with that, I will open the floor to the council for discussion if we want to have Ms. Vignal come up to talk about a choice program and what that entails, or whatever you guys want. I know there's a lot to unpack there.
Mr. Mayor? I know that of the people that are, at least in the materials that they're distributing, the people that are running for council are all broadly in support of this.
No, not right now.
No. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, I think when you consider what the residents and citizens of Miami Shores or their concerns have been about the school and the program availability, you know, if as outlined, you know, here is what the school board is willing to do with the village. I mean, this is very exciting and a step in the direction I think that everybody has been, you know, been trying to move in. So I would certainly want to at least, you know, continue putting that agreement together so they have something to bring to council sooner than later. But
Yep.
So this is not for the 1920 school year, though? This is for the 2021 school year?
I think that there is a chance, because the teachers have to be trained. Ms. McDonald, do you want to come up and talk about the mechanics of, yeah, yeah. Oh,
Mr. Mayor, while she's doing that, can I ask you one question? Is the information you got a communication that you have?
My name is Zoltan.
No. So I'm sorry, I pointed at her in front of you.
no,
She was-
that's
Yeah,
yours.
yeah, yeah, no,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry
Yeah,
about that,
sure,
yep,
sure.
yep.
The information you have, is that an indication that we have school board support or that we have the superintendent's support?
We have the superintendent's support.
Okay. Because I heard something about, you know, having school board support of it. What, maybe it's a question for you, is having the superintendent's support as good as having the school board support?
This is the first most important step, is to have the superintendent on board, so then the directive is given to staff to iron out the details. Once you go through the process of an interlocal agreement, where you will negotiate the terms of that interlocal agreement among staff and the council, at that time you bring it to the school board. So it's who can vote it up or down. In the case, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the school board, but I think, you know, the fact that the village is, you know, the families have really expressed a serious interest, and I think Miami Shores has been pretty quiet in the past when you look at other communities. And I think they've gotten the attention of the superintendent, which will eventually trickle to the school board as well. And the fact that, you know, if we bring something to the table, the district is more than happy to work along with the village in getting this forward. So far internally, just what I hear, because I do work in the Office of School Choice, is that this is great steps in the right direction. I can't speak again on behalf of the Education Advisory Board, but it's definitely something that we're excited about, that what we've put together, our hard work, is having such a positive outcome as well. And also, I am aware of some grants also at the state level that match certain funds, so that's something that we can continue to explore as well to help mitigate some of the upfront seed costs and or potentially some of any ongoing costs that might come forward.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, maybe now is a good time for Dana to explain the definitions of the programs, and especially the implementing really what are two programs at once. So
Sure. So the first question I think that Mayor Glenn had brought up is the difference between a magnet program and a choice program. So magnet programs are programs that are open up district-wide for students. So for example, iPrep in the downtown area, it doesn't matter where you live, you can still apply to that school, and it's a lottery to attend that school. So even if you live across the street from iPrep, you're not guaranteed admissions into that school. Whereas a choice program are programs that exist within boundary schools. It's just an additional option for parents. Some parents might not want to be in an iPrep, or they might not want to have the Cambridge program. They can opt out of it and stay within the traditional curriculum, or parents can opt in. Part of the interlocal agreement that would have to be ironed out is how many seats will be available, and you know, we'll have to, and maybe that's something that EAB can help with, is gauging the interest of the parents as to how many sections of that Cambridge program could be open. But that would be ironed out in the interlocal agreement. I think the advantage of the choice program is it's the boundary students will have first dibs. So if you're a Miami Shores resident and it was a magnet program within the school, you're not guaranteed admission into that school. So I think choice will achieve the objectives that we want to achieve without leaving out any Miami Shores residents.
And let's be clear, the Shores Elementary School boundaries extends past the borders of the Shores right now. So it's anybody that lives within that district will be a beneficiary of this.
Correct.
Yep.
Possibly people who live in the shores but are not in the district.
Correct.
On a application by application basis.
Correct.
As far as how two programs can coexist, that is really about school site implementation. So at Mass Academy, we had Cambridge STEM and we had Cambridge Global Studies. So it was the Cambridge philosophy, values, and learning objectives, but we would either couple it along with a STEM. I think the STEM program at Miami Shores Elementary, from what I hear, has been doing some great work. And I think it can work hand in hand very nicely with Cambridge. The learning objectives in Cambridge match perfectly with any kind of STEM program. I mean, it's critical thinking skills, problem solving skills. It's more of that deep, rich academic rigor that not only the families are seeking, but tie in hand with STEM. So it's, not an either or, but a both and.
Okay. Councilwoman?
So in terms of implementation, would the K-1 through 3, 1, 2, 3 approach be the most adaptable to this implementation plan?
I would really have to defer to staff, and I think there are conversations that should be had at the school site to fully understand the capacity of the teachers, what they want, what they might think is best. This has been rolled out pretty quickly, so I think those conversations are critical to, really defining what the vision and what the programming would look like. In terms of the Cambridge aspect, it could actually be implemented in 1920. The district they actually fly in professional development staff from the UK, because it is affiliated with the University of Cambridge. They'll fly in, they'll do 2 days of in-depth professional development for those teachers, for up to 30 teachers in the school site, which also ties in well to the survey because teacher quality was the number one deciding factor of how people gauge a great school. So I think professional development is an incredible investment. I know as a former teacher, we really welcome those rich opportunities that we might not necessarily get in the school district. And then as far as IPREP, again, there'll be, typically IPREP requires some sort of upfront capital improvements because if you've ever walked into an IPREP facility, colorful walls, collaborative learning spaces. So depending on the costs up front and the capital projects, perhaps one might roll out before the other, but the philosophy will still exist, perhaps before the facility improvements. But those are all details that would have to be ironed out by staff.
And just to double back on that, what's been conveyed to me is that there may be an opportunity because they're still planning and designing the bond upgrades that are happening already. They may be able to integrate a lot of the IPREP improvements into the current bond project, but they will evaluate if there's an additional capital cost, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilman?
Mr. Mayor, is this program, has it been instituted in any other communities such as what's sort of being proposed for here?
Yes, I'd have to look on my phone. There's probably, I think, at least 10 Cambridge primary programs. What is particularly great about having a Cambridge program here at Miami Shores Elementary is Horace Mann also has a Cambridge program. So it is a logical feeder pattern to grow that program. Or if a student chooses to go to Miami Beach Senior High into the IB, Cambridge does lead up well to IB as well. But I implemented the Cambridge programs at Mass Academy. It's very well received, and it really is a very inclusive type of program as well.
It doesn't alienate students who might not be your top-tier, self-motivated kind of kids. I found it to be an incredibly inclusive advanced academic program.
I'm sorry, I wasn't very clear. I did appreciate that
Mhm.
answer, though, because that did enlighten me a bit. But what about as a choice school? So what we're talking about here is turning elementary into that, and we would foot the initial $96,000 or thereabouts. Has that been done in any other community?
Yes, Cutler Bay has implemented Cambridge in their community, I believe through also an interlocal agreement. And I believe Miami Beach has funded the implementation of the IB programs. But I can definitely get back to you with exact figures and communities as well that have implemented this. And Key Biscayne also, part of their interlocal agreement was the Cambridge programs. For Mass Academy. Mhm.
Is there a program, a Cambridge program at Key Biscayne Elementary?
I'd have to get back to you on that, I'm not sure.
Okay. Because Key Biscayne is now a K through 8, right?
Mhm.
So, okay, I had heard that it was. Would it be possible to observe one of these programs?
Sure. I can definitely arrange that. Do you want to see a primary program or would you like to see? Okay, great. That can be arranged. And I'll put together a report of what, Cambridge schools exist right now in the school district. And then I'll ask them some of the prime examples too.
Great. Council, any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, the superintendent committed to just 1 year of Cambridge cost?
That's what they told us, the upfront cost.
Great, okay.
Not paying the maintenance cost.
Oh, that's great.
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor? So I apologize.
Yes.
So are we looking for guidance as to how to direct staff between, because there would have to be a lot of work done and an interlocal agreement hammered out that would then come back to council for a vote and go to the school board for a vote, correct?
Correct. So, it sounds like, though, there's a lot of issues that certain members of council would like to work through. Do we want to proceed with these conversations and negotiations? Do we want to tap the brakes and look at some other stuff? I'm not, I just want to keep the ball rolling on this, but I don't want to, outdrive our headlights, right?
My sense is that, no, my sense is not to tap the brakes. My sense is to move forward, because I know these things take longer than you believe they are going to. So if we move forward because we know we have the mandate, and we believe as a council we have the mandate, and as Vice Mayor Brady said, I haven't heard anything at these forums that would indicate to me that there are people about to occupy these seats that wouldn't be fully in favor of this, especially with that price tag, because there has been, if you trust that price tag, that's better than what we were thinking was going to be. So I wouldn't see any reason not to continue to move forward and that staff and give staff that ability. And then we're going to be bringing it up again as after the election happens. It's not that this issue is going to go away, or that we're going to not be able to schedule it as an agenda item. So I believe we have the ability to continue to answer the questions.
So I'm going to make a motion that that we ask the manager to go forward with this guidance and try and come back with a preliminary agreement that can be discussed by the next council and make a decision from there.
I would second that.
Okay. All right. Unless there's any other discussion, we'll call the question on this. Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the Education Advisory Board, and thanks again, Vice Mayor, for doing that. That was, you guys did terrific work on that, and the timing was good.
And Mr. Mayor, just for the record, I wanted to note that Leslie Fraser is also here from the Education Advisory Board.
Great.
Item 9D. Update on the former Catholic Charities building. This item is sponsored.
No, only on ordinances, public comments at the beginning and then before each ordinance. And technically, it's only on second reading of ordinances, but we've changed sort of policy here to do it on first reading of ordinances as well.
But you can email and call any of
Yeah, we are available by email, telephone, whatever. You can come up to the dais, we can talk about anything you'd
We'll
like.
meet with you after,
Yep.
if you'd like.
Thanks. All right, so let's move on to the next item. And this is the Catholic Charities item that I put on agenda. I just felt like it was very important that this issue should be addressed before the conclusion of this term of council, since this is something that's been hanging out there for a long time. And I just, after talking with the manager, I put together a timeline of the Catholic Charities building and the purchase and everything else that's going on with it, so that people understand what's happened.
You're going to give us copies of those?
Yes.
All those bullets?
Yeah, all those
Flying
bullets.
around over
I will actually put both of these into the record, just so that they have those. But, the village purchased the former Catholic Charities building, now known as the 9999 building, during the last term of council, by every expert. 9900, sorry, 9900. Wrong one. It's already wrong. First sentence. By every expert in the market that we talked to at the time, it was considered a fantastic deal. Originally we considered the building, and this was a proposal from then Vice Mayor Zelkowitz, as a part of a large P3 project that would replace our outdated police department and Village Hall, while also activating downtown with new retail and restaurants. Pretty exciting. However, the viability study at that point came back from our redevelopment experts and suggested that it would not be successful. So we then went out to market with an RLI, which was something we tried out to see if there was interest in the market to have an outside party come in and manage it and lease it and upgrade the facility and turn it into a food hall concept. This was before the Citadel. Unfortunately, while we had some interest, at the end of the day, the market did not find the opportunity to be compelling enough. So we were trying to roll out other uses and solutions for this thing. And subsequent to that, we've had no less than 6 and possibly, and I'll ask the manager, possibly closer to 10 different parties come through and look at that, or is it 14? 14. Come by and look at the space after hearing of our interest in finding an operator, a developer, or curator, right? I walked them through personally with Tom. Unfortunately, none of those folks were willing to move forward. Now, many were interested in purchasing the property. And in fact, I know that there are still parties in this community that would make an offer on the property if they thought it would get traction with the council, would make that offer today. And frankly, I like that idea, selling the property where we could encumber the property before selling, require restaurant and retail on the bottom floor, and, then all of a sudden it switches to private hands, we're making tax dollars on it, and it activates downtown. I mean, that's a great idea. But I was discouraged at moving forward on that, and I want to share that tonight because some situations have changed that we can share some of that. At the same time that all of this was coming up, that we were considering the sale of that facility, another opportunity came up, and we were asked, or I was asked by staff, I don't know if anybody else was, I was asked by staff to wait, and specifically the village found out that they may be in line for forfeiture funds that could possibly be used to upgrade our police station, right? However, staff felt that we ought to hold that property, the 9900 building, in case we needed it as flex space to move the police into if we were able to renovate the police station with those funds. One challenge was this, though. I knew about this from staff, but due to the sensitive nature of the forfeiture process and the confidentiality that was involved at that point in the process, they said that we had to keep this confidential. The government said that they didn't want us to talk about this. However, I've continued to push forward on this issue, and I've talked to staff repeatedly about it, and I think I hope, they acquiesced and said it was okay to talk about it at this point, that the powers that be had said it was okay. And consequently, as soon as I got that blessing, which I pushed on until my very last meeting, which is tonight, I thought it important for the public to know why we have stood pat on this project, right? Because we did make an investment as a village. That being said, I hope that staff and the next council bring this to a resolution as quickly as possible. I don't want to hold that property. I do not support continuing to use the 9900 building as an overflow facility for the rec center on prime downtown, possibly taxable real estate. Besides slowing the redevelopment of downtown, I think that it has taken some of the pressure off the need for a new rec center to accommodate the village's needs. I think it has been bad for what I believe in two different ways. So with that, I wanted to get this out in the open. I don't know if the manager has comment, I don't know if the council has comment, but I felt like now that we have the ability to share this, that the confidentiality issues are not major, that we ought to share it with the public. So there you have it. Comment, council?
Mayor?
Yes.
Since, this was something that had come up, and I was behind purchasing this property and had vision at the time for a P3 project. There's other cities who are redeveloping their, government facilities. I mean, I think this village hall needs to be redeveloped. I think the police station needs to be redeveloped. And we did have some variations on the P3 that could have worked. And maybe if downtown had, turned around a little quicker, or maybe it does in the future, it could have happened. But I don't think that the vision is there right now for that to happen. This is a valuable piece of property, and I agree. There's no reason it should be off the tax rolls. Okay, we took it off the tax rolls for a specific purpose. That purpose is not happening. So, in my opinion, it should go back on the tax rolls, unless the next council has some sort of vision that they think that they have the political will and the public support to put into place. And I agree. It also, gives this cushion not to go forward with the new community center, which was something else that was on the agenda over the last 4 years. So, again, people are concerned about, having to pay more money for stormwater assessments. Here's a property that is probably entirely impervious, which would add more money to the stormwater assessments. It would add, I don't know how much to the tax rolls every year that would, help for other projects as well. So, unless there can be something, innovative and visionary implemented quickly by the next council, I would, think that it would be, what would you call it? Perhaps, I don't know what to call it, a breach of the public trust, but it certainly wouldn't be the best business judgment of the council to maintain this property off the tax rolls for just, different uses here and there. So, I mean, I probably could go on, but I think, I have the same sort of, regurgitation of the same opinion. So I'm just going to let it go at that, and hopefully the next council can, get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman?
Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you both, actually. That was refreshing. I really appreciate those thoughts, and you've had years of experience inside and outside of this building, especially in your service, and as in your work, in your careers, in your profession. I do have one question with regard, Mayor Glenn had said that you thought maybe it would be best served to encumber it, right, retail and restaurant only first floor. And Councilman Zelkowitz, do you agree with that? I just would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, in concept, yes. I mean, I think there's many ways you could structure the sale of the property, and you could do it on an RFP or even a bid basis, and you set forth what you want the person or the entity, of course, who buys this property to do with it. So you can go down that road first instead of because encumbering to me means I'm going to record something on the property. It says you can only do this. And once you do that and this, village puts some sort of restrictions on the property, then that could, create a difficulty down the road in lifting them if, you decided you didn't want to have that there. My suggestion would be to structure the potential sale in such a manner where you would say, okay, we have this piece of property, we want to sell it, this is what we want to see there. Give us your best offer financially and your best offer developmentally as to what you would do. And maybe the council can come up with some other incentives that might sweeten the pot for a potential buyer.
So I'm unclear though with how that works. Would that require them to be retail and restaurant, or is that just their proposed idea?
If that's, it's the will of the council. I mean, you're gonna put out a request for bids or request for proposals and say, this is what we want. And in order to qualify to put in a bid or to put in a proposal to buy the property, you have to provide a development scheme in line with what you, as the village, as the council, say we want on this property. Right. So if you want just restaurant, you say, okay, you're gonna buy this, you gotta do restaurants.
It's going to be covered in whoever the successful bidder is, whatever they proposed that was accepted would be incorporated in the purchase contract as an obligation.
So they'd be in breach if they decided
Yeah,
to do.
there'd be some sort of enforceable mechanism.
Well, at that point, and this is how we do these transactions, you would enter into a development agreement.
Exactly.
With the purchaser of the property. Okay, and that would probably be one of the statutory development agreements with the village that says this is what you're gonna build. You might even incorporate the site plan at that point.
And as the entity that issues the permits, we have extra teeth.
Okay, so
Councilwoman.
I have a question. So what happens if, since the forfeiture fund issue is now on the table, what happens if the forfeiture funds come through? We have a police department who, during their interviews of the candidates, are asking, what about their facility? Now, they have the newest facility in this village.
Yeah.
But it was built in such a way
Yeah.
that it is inadequate for their needs.
100%.
Now, not horribly inadequate, it's not a slum or anything.
Yep.
But the property also has 30 parking spaces.
Yep.
What happens if those forfeiture funds come through and we have that opportunity for our police department? Public safety is number one in our thinking. So, it's not the best, it's not the best provider of a revenue stream, but if the forfeiture funds would cover it, I'm very interested in the answer to that question.
No question. And I think my point is not that we shouldn't improve the police station. I'm just saying, it's time for something to happen, right? One way or another, that we can't continue to indefinitely, 6 months, a year, wait for this money to show up and hold on to this property because we might use it as flex space to accommodate the police where they might move over there while we renovate it.
They can have pods.
Yeah, well, or you can do like most other facilities when they're renovated. You work in a facility and it's uncomfortable and it's a bit of an inconvenience, but you renovate it while you're there. It's super convenient and great to have a flex space to move into, but that is not a necessity, right? You can renovate active facilities. I do it every day. I mean, would it be ideal while we have it, wait another couple of months, another 6 months while this is done, another year when we see the end in sight? Yeah, but just to wait interminably for the market to turn down and not to be able to sell it for top dollar, it just does not, in my opinion, does not make sense. We need to have finality on this.
And can you give me some idea of the proposed profit margin on this? Are we talking?
I mean, the sense that I've gotten just from very preliminary conversations with people that have interest in the building is that it would be significantly higher than what we paid for it. So, again, I'm just throwing it out there. I think the public should know why we've been waiting. Right. That was really not the purpose tonight was not to make a decision. It was to let people council members talk in public. It's almost like, it allows us to work within sunshine and have a discussion on the subject. But, the people have wanted to know, and I've been asked multiple occasions, why haven't you sold that building? Why is nothing happening with that building? I feel like there's an obligation to tell folks why we did it, now that there's no longer this sort of cone of secrecy hanging over us. That's it. Sorry.
I think you should feel exonerated from that burden.
I do. It's lifted.
Cone of silence.
The cone of...
Gets one.
Can we ask something about it?
No, not at the end of the meeting. At the end of the meeting.
You could have run for office, and then you'd be up here in a few weeks.
At the end of the meeting, you can come ask us anything.
You guys gone anyway. It's gonna be a new car.
All right, you're out of order.
Way out of
Way out of order. You gotta dial it back.
Announcements. Announcements. Dance Now Miami will be hosting a contemporary and interpretive company dance at the Miami Theater Center on Friday, April 5th at 8 p.m. The address of the Miami Theater Center is 9806 Northeast 2nd Avenue. Please reserve your free seat on eventbrite.com. Search Miami Theater Center or call 305-758-8103. Need a ride to downtown Miami? Miami Shores Village is offering free shuttle service from the Community Center to Brightline Station, downtown Metro Mover 5th Street Station. Call the Community Center for more information at 305-758-8103. The village election is scheduled for Tuesday, April 9th. Please contact the village clerk at 305-762-4870 for more information. The deadline to request a vote by mail ballot is April 3rd, 2019. The next meeting of the Village Council will be held at Village Hall on Tuesday, May 7th, 2019, beginning at 6:30 p.m. The Miami Shores Community Shred Day and Prescription Drug Takeback will be held on Saturday, April 27th from 9 a.m. to noon at the Miami Shores Presbyterian Church parking lot at 602 Northeast 96th Street. Please remember to visit the Village website for more information on Village events, departments, and to sign up to receive agenda notifications. Village Council comments.
Council, any comments?
Just want to ask a quick question. So when we have the the swearing-in ceremony for the next council, current council, Mr. Mayor, you will be present for that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Great.
Current
Fantastic.
council starts at the beginning of the meeting, leaves halfway through.
That's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure.
When does that happen?
It's a Tuesday.
April 16th.
So the only thing that I would say here is to all of you, please vote. Please make sure your neighbors vote. Our turnout is usually not very high for village council elections. It's very important. But definitely make sure, take your neighbors with you, go vote. So, and remember that the election is always at the community center, not at your regular polling place. Sometimes there's some confusion about that, but make sure to, and if you have the mail ballot, make sure to send it in now. And if you have it and you haven't had a chance to vote, to mail it in time, bring it to the polling place with you, turn it in there and vote. But I just wanted to say this has been a great council to work with, but I know we'll have one more time to get together, so thank you.
Great.
Mr. Mayor, that almost sounded like the vice mayor was actually running
Yeah.
at this point. But he's out of the four of us, he's the one who's short of sitting up here again. And I know we're going to have another opportunity, and I know it's been a long and productive meeting, and I just want to say it's been an honor, and I'm humbled to serve with all of you as the former vice mayor and the councilman in Miami Shores Village. I was reminiscing with Alice before the meeting about the election 4 years ago and going into Doral to the elections headquarters, dealing with a machine recount and then a hand recount, and having what was probably the closest election, I think, in Miami Shores Village history, where Alice and I were separated by 2 votes. Yes. And I actually said to her before the meeting, I'll say it on the record, I'm happy that she was the mayor because I think, she did a great job. She dedicated more time, I think, than I would have been able to due to my career, to the village. And I think back at that point, you came in 4th place. Yeah, I lost and through a series of circumstances that no one could have ever predicted, even probably with a crystal ball. We had some resignations. Mac ended up, I think at that point, I had to vacate my seat on the Planning and Zoning Board, and I made the motion to appoint you to the Planning and Zoning Board. And then we had the resignation of Jesse Walters that opened up a council seat, and then we made the motion to appoint you to the council, and then of course you were elected the mayor, and I just want to say you've done a fantastic job as well as mayor, and appreciate everything we've done, everything we tried to do, and it's my hope that the folks who are running are and will be as dedicated as the folks who are up here are and have been in moving forward the agenda of Miami Shores Village and making it a better place for everybody who lives and works here. I just wanted to say that. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Councilman.
So, Mr. Mayor, yes, I have to say that it was an incredible journey. And I do remember that day in Doral. I don't want to relive that day. So if people could please figure that out when they go into the voting booth. But I have so much enjoyed serving with you, and I'm going to miss you, especially on things that you have expertise. And I want to say that to Steve as well. There have been so many times that we've drawn on the expertise of you and Mac, as well as the rest of us. And I think that's what's made it such a collegial and cooperative and productive group, is that we respect each other's abilities in various ways and have put them out there for the village, and I appreciate that very much. So thanks to everyone. I did want to mention, just as a little add-on to the Vice Mayor's statement about the election, and that is there is a forum tomorrow night at 6:30 at the Miami Theater Center, so that would be one more time to hear all the candidates together. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman?
and, just a brief thank you to both of you. Seriously, your expertise, your intelligence, and everything, it's been an honor to serve with you guys and to learn from you. And as one who, I guess what's the expression, we know how the sausage is made up here. So I know the commitment, the sacrifice that you guys had, and most times it's just people complaining to you, and they don't understand how much you've given and what you've done and the positive impact. So I just truly thank you, and I'm going to miss you guys.
Thank you, Councilman. I have a few things that I'm going to say real quick, and I'm not going to go, I know you're looking at that. I'm not reading that whole thing, I swear to God. But it was a very divided council when we got here. This council has a diverse array of political orientation and beliefs, but more often than not, we are 4 and 5 votes in one direction. We have worked very hard to build consensus here. We've, like you said, listened to expertise and tried to make the best decisions for the benefit of our residents and our businesses, and we've accomplished a lot. We have 4 straight years of declining crime rates. We have a new license plate reader camera system to keep our residents safer. We have a dog park, right? We have a new park on 2nd Avenue. We allow wine bars, and we have a wine bar on 2nd Avenue. You can actually now buy a cocktail at a restaurant on 2nd Avenue, and there'll be 2 restaurants before the end of the summer that serve them. We have a single consistent design palette for downtown. We have new events like Plaza 98 and the Farmers Market that our residents love and have really created some interest downtown. We have a new sewer system downtown. We have started the process of beautifying our downtown and making it more walkable. I still think that was a great investment, the 9900 building, and we're going to make money on that, and it's going to do a lot to jumpstart our downtown. We just broke ground on a children's wing to our library, the first new wing in how many years, Tom? How long has it been?
And, yes,
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah, and a lot of it funded through donations, right? I mean, it was a true sort of community partnership with this council. We did the vulnerability study. We joined the American Flood Coalition. We waived permit fees for solar arrays. Bless you. We joined Mayors for 100. I mean, all kinds of environmental initiatives. We tackled bike and pedestrian safety, other transit and quality of life issues that people have been complaining about. We liberalized our landscape ordinance and made it easier for people to have the hedges that they wanted and got them out of the way of code so that they could have privacy on their property. We finally signed a compact with Miami Shores Elementary, the last municipality in Miami-Dade to do it, but we're working collaboratively with them, as you heard tonight. We've also stabilized Doctors Charter. We have a great director there, and we've been very supportive of their efforts. This has been a very busy, productive council. But there are a number of initiatives where the clock ran out that I would have liked to do, and I'm going to mention a couple of those, right, just because it's on the record. And I'd love somebody to pick up the ball.
I'm just going to write this down.
That's fine. Parks Master Plan and Landscaping Standards RFP. We need professional advice. Our folks do a great job, our staff does a great job, but it's time to turn to a professional third-party group to give feedback on how we can upgrade and activate our public spaces. It's time, right? Our residents demand it. That is what a top-flight community does, and we should do it. And while our Fine Arts Commission does a nice job, and I enjoy our concerts and the artwork in the library and City Hall, I hope that we can start to think even bigger, right? Art Basel literally happens all around us. They are in North Miami with their satellite fairs. They're in Little River. They're all over. We have great public space. We have a educated, interested, diverse community here that would love to see those events. It's time to bring those in. I tried for 2 years on my own. I couldn't do it on my own. We need a bigger group to reach out to them and see what we can do, I think. Next, there is the issue of annexation. I think there are opportunities for our community to grow in a positive fashion by bringing in some unincorporated communities. It has to be revenue neutral. We shouldn't do it, and just look to cherry pick. We should bring in other communities that would have interest. I think there's interest out there. I've had those conversations. People want to join the Shores. I also, and I want to talk about this because this is something that I've tried to do, and the manager can talk about our conversations. It is time that we build a park somehow, and I've looked, and I like to find park sites, as Councilman Zelkowitz and Councilman Birch remember from the dog park adventure, but we need a park on the west side of Miami Shores. We need to identify a parcel, we need to make the investment, we need to buy it, and we need to provide a park for the west side. And I don't know where it is, I've looked, but we need to I believe that we should make that effort. I think it will go a long way to build goodwill and make people feel included and a part of it, and like we're making the investment. I also hold out hope that sanity will prevail and this community will get behind a new and/or dramatically expanded and renovated community center. We heard the demographics of the village later tonight. With so many young people coupled with so many older residents, there is a clear need for a facility of this type. I hope the next council will begin the process by holding public hearings to get feedback from the community on what they will support. Start there. I think that the time has come to take another run at it. I also think we need to continue to listen to our downtown businesses and try and find ways to support them. Lighting is a real issue downtown. I would have tackled that. It's time for better lighting, and I wish the council would consider funding significant improvements of this type, infrastructure, right? That is the kind of investment we should make. I've been outspoken about other infrastructure as well, specifically new medians and how important they would be to improving the aesthetics of downtown. We have the initial blessing from the county to make these changes, which is incredible given the fact that Northeast 2nd is an artery. That they said yes is unbelievable. We can integrate crosswalks into it. We should take advantage of this and move forward with it. I mean, it's a no-brainer. As a last priority, and I think it's perhaps the most significant, and we talked about it tonight, we took a big first step. I hope that this council will aggressively seek resources to help prepare for climate change, especially dealing with sea level rise. This includes pressing our staff to finalize plans to make this a resilient, sustainable city as a part of the Mayors for 100 initiative. It'll be a significant undertaking and will require courage and investment, and I hope that it will remain at the top of the list for the next group on the dais. That's enough, right? More than enough. But at this point, I want to thank, for one last time, all of the residents that gave me the incredible opportunity to serve this community. I won't say that I've always enjoyed it, because I haven't. But it has always felt worthwhile and meaningful, and I appreciate your faith in me and the chance you gave me to contribute to our progress. But more importantly, this has been a very hard-working council up here, and I have thoroughly enjoyed the time we've spent together, and I think we've done a ton of good. I'm a firm believer, I'm a throwback, I believe in the common good and being one community and doing whatever we can to make everybody go home at the end of the meeting, whether you're up here on the dais or you're out there in the audience, like you've been heard, and we might not always agree, but we do our best to accommodate everybody's interests, and it's been a pleasure to work with you on that stuff. So with that, I appreciate it, and the meeting's adjourned.
Oh, yeah. You want to
He
do a
does know that he gets to make that same speech again.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Hey, thank you very much.
Good job, sir.
Yeah.
switch.
You know, it never
I'm old,
ceases to
yes.
amaze me when
Yes.
people get up and say.
Yes.
All right, let's do pictures.
Right.
Got a
Right.
seal.
How you doing?
Excuse me, we're gonna take a quick picture.
One quick picture that's gonna take.
One last picture.
Second Avenue, 98. Yeah, okay. If you want more of this.
Oh, oh.
1, 2, 3. Okay, let me take one with myself.
Mr. Haggerty, let's get
I wanna get out.
1, 2, 3. Aw. One more. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Sean.
See you soon. Good to see you.
When are you out?
Not until second week of June, let's get together. Actually, a matter. So. All right, man. I got it. Pretty late tomorrow. Right?
All right.
Outstanding. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm hoping
Yes, sir.
Yeah.